Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Viceroy of Verisimilitude, your master of fun and wonder, your existential Mr. Rogers, and of course, bringing you the NPR in the genre pundit space. That would be Robservations, the show about something. This is Robservations number 286. My God, it's Black Friday. And you know where I'm not? I am not shopping. And I'm a better man for it. That's why they created the internet. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, there's this incredible shopping tool. It's called the internet, where you can go on and you can order anything you want. If I want to buy model kits from Japan, I can go do that. I can order Italian Blu-rays if I want to do that from Amazon, Italy. It's amazing. You just hit click and they send you stuff. It's amazing. You don't have to go anywhere. You can just kind of chill out and play with the dogs. You can do anything you want. It's amazing. You should try it. I guess you are trying. You're here with me, watching me now, which I thank you for. And this is exciting to be here. It's on Black Friday. My God, the day after Thanksgiving. We had a wonderful Thanksgiving here at the house. Elizabeth and her mom and her brother was here from Vermont. Her brother, who acquired Tallulah for us, drove from Vermont to Pennsylvania and got Tallulah from an Amish farm. I kid you not. It's a long story, but a true one at that. Lovely. Sophie was here. Zoe was here. We had a great turkey. We had great mashed potatoes, and Zoe made some homemade mac and cheese that was delightful. But I have to tell you, I guess we got them at Whole Foods or something. I was never a green bean guy growing up, but one of the things that happens when you get old with one foot in the grave is that your tastes change. And I don't know. I'm kind of a fiend for green beans. And these were giant, thick and robust green beans, lightly buttered I put pepper on them. And man, they were good. I was eating them like potato chips. I don't know what that means about my old age, but maybe that's too much information for all of you. What does that matter? I don't know. But anyway, as you all know, these chats are brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products. And if you go to, they're for men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to their website, by the way, you can punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity, and you get 20% off of your order. And we are also giving away, we gave one away, and I don't even know the name of the person who won it. I got to find that out. But until Christmas, we're giving away a bottle of Lucky Tiger all over body wash, head to tail body wash for our viewers. All you have to do is go to our website at Burnettwork.net and put a comment on anything that's up there. There's like 1,000 different pieces of content. All you have to do is comment on one, and you can be put into a random drawing to get a bottle of Lucky Tiger head to tail body wash. How great is that? I'll tell you what else is great. All right. I'm going to say it. That last TV spot for The Rise of Skywalker, what is it, Duel or whatever it's called? As soon as I hit play, it's only 30 seconds, it's a TV spot, and I heard Duel of the Fates playing. Let me tell you, I got sucked right in. I mean, I'm like, there's TIE fighters and Star Destroyers, and we've seen Rey and Reylo on top of that wreckage of the Death Star fighting. That's fine. But I have to tell you, there was something about that trailer, even seeing Rey with her blaster shooting out the Fury Road stormtroopers out of the sky. I'm like, you know what, man? I just got that tingly feeling. No matter, with all of the discontent amongst the fan community about Star Wars, all you have to do, I'll tell you, I am no fan of J.J. Abrams. I've told people how many times have I gone off about how I did not like The Force Awakens at all. I certainly don't like Super 8, and I hate his Star Trek movies. I do. But every time he makes a movie, in fact, every time anybody makes a movie, I think Gilbert and I, how you doing, buddy? Gilbert enjoyed, he certainly had some turkey with nothing on it, of course, and he was in a tryptophan coma last night. He slept very well. But who doesn't want Star Wars to be good? I mean, really. Everybody wants Star Wars to be good, and I've been watching Star Wars since I was 10. I have thousands and thousands of dollars worth of Star Wars merch here. I have 12-inch action figures. I have unbuilt resin model kits. I've got a 3-foot unbuilt Star Destroyer model, which it's made out of resin. You know, it's about it's huge. The thing is, though, to do it correctly, you really need I need fiber optics, and I need about 1,000, I would imagine. That's what I estimated when I looked at it. That was made by a guy named Randy Cooper. If you guys are model kit fans, Randy Cooper has made some amazing large-scale Star Destroyer kits. He's also made, he did a police spinner from Blade Runner and a shuttlecraft from the original series of Star Trek, about this big. You just look up Randy Cooper, just like it sounds, Randy Cooper models on the internet, and you'll go salivate at his work. Now, it's not licensed. They're garage kits, so they're made out of resin. So they require a lot of patience, and they require some modeling skill. But I have to tell you, man, I bought that Star Destroyer kit of his. He's made a new one that's even better. But I mean, I'm not going to drop another $700. You know, who's got that kind of money? I got Hot Toys to buy, right? But yeah, I still have his old kit. I need to build it. It's still a great kit. And I got to tell you, seeing all those classic Star Destroyers in formation, whether there's 200 of them or however many there are, I'm like, man, I got to build my Randy Cooper Star Wars kit. I am in the midst. I am in the thrall of Star Wars mania. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care about all you detractors from The Last Jedi. I love Star Wars, and whether or not, look, in my life, I've received 2 truly great Star Wars movies, Star Wars and Empire. Those are my favorites. They're the best. I think they're head and shoulders above the other Star Wars films. But like I said, the prequel trilogy, not good movies, but there's a lot of good Star Wars in them. And with some distance, I can enjoy them more than I thought. And by the way, I'm pretty much inclined to buy Hot Toys figures from the prequel trilogy more than I am the sequel trilogy. I do not own any Hot Toys from the sequel trilogy. I own a number of figures from the prequel trilogies, including a gaggle of clone troopers. When Sideshow was putting them out, I probably have like 10 different clone troopers. I love them. I love my clone troopers. I don't care. One day they're all going to turn on my action figures. I understand that. There's going to be an action figure uprising. But I have to tell you, man, I love Star Wars. Hell, I've been moving around stuff in the garage, building this new set that I'm going to move on to for episode 300. I have that die-cast. Revell put out a die-cast Naboo Starfighter kit, and I have it. I never built it. You know, it's die-cast metal. I'm like, why don't I have that? I got the Jedi Starfighters from Revenge of the Sith. I got both Obi-Wans and Anakin's. I have those. Why didn't I ever build my Naboo Starfighter? I don't know, but I think I'm going to get in there and build it. I'm going to have a Star Wars month. I'm going to set up all my Hot Toys figures so you can see them on the new set. And I don't think I've ever opened any of my Star Wars Hot Toys figures except my quarter scale Boba Fett. And that ended badly recently, which I'm very upset about. But I'll figure out how to deal with that. But anyway, so I'm watching this trailer, man. I'm watching the new, well, it's not a trailer, it's a TV spot. I'm watching the new TV spot for Rise of Skywalker. I'm listening to Duel of the Fates. I'm watching space battles around a fleet of Star Destroyers in an iceberg, wherever they are, I don't care. And I just realized, I'm like, man, I'm excited. I am excited for the Rise of Skywalker. All of these detractors and all this, I watch it all. I watch every little bit of material online about whenever somebody puts on a video that's derogatory or negative. I'm all over it. I watch it. Of course I watch it. But you know what? I got up this morning. You know what I did? I didn't wait last night because I was tired, tryptophan coma, all that. I got up this morning. I fed the dogs. I went and made coffee. That's my morning routine. I feed the dogs. Actually, I go in and I put up the pot of coffee. I grind the beans. I put the coffee in so it percolates. While it's percolating, I mix, of course, the dogs' their kibble with some raw wet food, making this concoction. I'm a great dog food cook, let me tell you, and make it for the dogs. And by the time I do that, and I change their water out, so they have brand new water, make sure they're all situated. I get back. As Elizabeth says, I'm her favorite barista. I make our coffee with the right balance of cream, robust, full coffee, a little bit of cinnamon, and a little bit of this French artificial sweetener that we use. Let me tell you, it's great stuff. And of course, how you make the great coffee. Here's my secret. So I put in my ingredients, right? The cream goes in first, the cinnamon goes in first, the French artificial sweetener goes in first. Then you pour half a cup right? And then you mix it all. You mix it all. You mix it all. You make sure that everything is frothily and mixed into the coffee so you don't see anything on top. It's just all together. Then you pour the rest of the cup in and then you stir it some more. Then I give it a little bit of a taste to make sure that it's just the way Elizabeth wants it. She likes a little less cream than I do. I'm a cream fiend, so I probably have a little bit more than her. Then I take it into her. And this morning, I took it into her. She's waking up and she had to work today. So I set it down and it's about, 7:15 a.m. And I said, guess what, honey? Click, turn on The Mandalorian, yo. The Mandalorian episode 4, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. And today's episode, no spoilers, but it was a pastiche of a number of different things that you've seen before. Now, I know there's all these detractors saying, it's not very deep. Here's the thing about The Mandalorian. What I kind of like is you need to embrace the idea that it's just a classical Western, which it is. The whole thing is a classical Western. I mean, it's not very deep, but I think it isn't. It's there's nothing particularly surprising about the show yet. But I see the entire Mandalorian series as a proof of concept. The whole thing was to see, first of all, would people watch it? It's become the #1 streaming series of all time. It's outstreamed Stranger Things 3, apparently. Would people embrace it? Would it drive the audience to Disney Plus? It certainly has done that. By the way, yes, I got my new studio headphones. Thank you very much. It's so I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying these quick bites. I think that there's a lot of scrutiny. There's a lot of people that are criticizing the show, and I think there's a lot of people that have good points. I mean, I can't wait to when this is all over. Somebody's going to do the super cut and just cut together the whole thing as one movie or one program. I hope they do that. I really want to see that. But for the most part, Carla Gugino's character was introduced today. What's her name? That's not her name. But her name, I forget her name. It's Cara something in the show. But I liked her character, the backstory. She said something about the Emps, like meaning the Empire. I thoroughly enjoyed the whole thing. Yes, it's all classical storytelling. You've seen all of it before. But it was really interesting that Bryce Dallas Howard, I think she's making her directorial debut, Ron Howard's daughter. So we now have Star Wars legacy directors. And I really liked what she did. Well, I don't want to say it, but she clearly, her time on the set of the Jurassic World movies has paid off because she was able to utilize that to her benefit in this episode. So basically, I love the fact we're 4 episodes in. We get 3 more episodes. Then we get the Rise of Skywalker. Then the final episode 8 of The Mandalorian. And basically, I just find myself enjoying Star Wars. I just like dipping in. And the fact that we're getting, it's amazing. We're getting basically 7 weeks of Star Wars, 8 weeks. 7, 8 weeks of Star Wars, really 7, but it's just fantastic, and I'm just enjoying the hell out of the whole thing. Now, you can be cynical all you want, but for this time being, until December 27th, when the episode 8 of The Mandalorian airs, which is a week after The Rise of Skywalker drops, episode 7 drops on the 13th, and then The Rise of Skywalker is on the 20th. And then on the 27th is the final episode of The Mandalorian. And I'm just, I've made a lifestyle choice. People. A lifestyle choice to love Star Wars, at least until the end of December. Then I can pick it apart. Then I can talk about what I think is really interesting. And as I've often compared Star Wars to other franchises that I've loved. The Bond franchise, Planet of the Apes. And I think that a lot of these franchises, if you look at them, they have fewer great movies than they have other movies in the franchise. But I just enjoy them. Did I love the prequels when they came out? Did I love Phantom Menace? No. Phantom Menace was hugely disappointing. But I've told people on this show many times before that Return of the Jedi is the most disappointing movie that I've ever seen in my life, because it tread old ground. It didn't become as epic as I thought it was going to be. I wanted something with the scope of Return of the King, because at that time I'd only read the book, but I looked at Tolkien's trilogy as something that, oh, if you're going to have a trilogy, that's what you emulate. You want to get big. And I thought Return of the Jedi, while it had another space battle that had more spaceships in it, again, you're over the Death Star, the Ewoks, all that stuff. Everybody knows. A lot of people, Return of the Jedi is their favorite Star Wars movie. John Campea talks about Return of the Jedi being his favorite Star Wars movie. It was not mine. I saw Empire Strikes Back 26 times in the theater. I thought I was going to get some epic, transcendent experience. I did not. However, to this day, the scene with Luke, the Emperor, and Vader to me is peak Star Wars. Peak Star Wars. Now, yes, I talk about how the Emperor was not Clive Revel from The Empire Strikes Back, and a lot of people today are going to go, who's Clive Revel? I know, that's the problem. But I love the Emperor as portrayed in Empire, and I did think in Jedi he becomes a little Snow White. But I love Ian McDiarmid in the prequels. He's one of my favorite things. When the Jedi when Mace Windu and company come to arrest him in Revenge of the Sith, and he fully exposes who he really is. I love that. I love that they're bringing him back. I can't wait to see the Emperor. I wish he'd come wreck shop and win. If I made that movie, he'd kill everyone and take over the galaxy. And him and Rey and Kylo, the two of them, it would have been the three of them instead of master and apprentice. It would have been a master and two apprentices. You'd have Reylo, they'd hook up, and under the tutelage of Palpatine, they would square away the galaxy, setting up a new trilogy. We'll take it in a different direction. I know that's not going to happen, but if I did it, wouldn't that be epic? Come on. Palpatine should win, because everyone else is kind of a chump in this new trilogy. You know, whatever happens, I just want to see the Emperor wreck shop, and he's not going to win. I know. I don't know why he would be hanging out on Endor or wherever the hell they are, but it's sort of weird. But that's okay. I can't wait. I'm in the grips of some Star Wars excitement, and I hope you all are too. And while everybody talks about here's what I think, and this is what bothers me. Every time I see all this negativity in fandom, and there's a lot of it, and I've been a purveyor of it, especially when it comes to Star Trek, because modern Star Trek is bad. And I understand. I understand what it's like when you become disillusioned. I do. I've been disillusioned about Star Trek for a decade, full-on decade. I've been disillusioned. And I understand. A lot of people enjoy Star Trek that I don't, and I don't begrudge them. If Star Trek Discovery or Star Trek 09 was the first time God forbid, Star Trek Into Darkness was the first time you ever discovered Star Trek and you liked it, I think that's a good thing. And there's a lot of people that have been disenchanted by Star Wars because it wasn't what they wanted. But I would say this. If you make the choice to sit down and try and enjoy this material, you know, it is a choice. Just like I make a choice every time I watch a new episode of Discovery or, God forbid, Short Treks. I'm like, I go into it with my eyes open. I'm like, you know what? This time it's going to be great. This time I'm going to love it. Now, The Mandalorian, I've tempered my expectations with what it is, and I'm enjoying it as a sort of classical Western set in the Star Wars universe. And I like the little things that they're dropping down. And yes, is it groundbreaking storytelling? Certainly not. Am I riveted by the in-depth and the emotional and the definite questions? I mean, are we seeing something like Breaking Bad in the Star Wars universe, which is what I kind of hoped for? Certainly not. We're getting something that is very easy to go down, easy to digest. I think fun for the whole family. And there's something to be said about that, because it's kind of interesting. And I'm really enjoying seeing where it's going to go. I have no idea what's going to happen. And yes, is it like Hard Boiled, John Woo's Hard Boiled? Sure. Is it like Lone Wolf and Cub? Probably, although I'm waiting for the Mandalorian to make Daigoro choose. I've started calling Baby Yoda Daigoro. If you know Shogun Assassin or Lone Wolf and Cub, I've named Baby Yoda Daigoro, and I'm waiting for the moment to see if the Mandalorian sits down a katana or a ball and makes Baby Yoda Daigoro make a choice which path he will choose. And Pocahontas, and I can say that when Trump says it, he says it disparagingly to Elizabeth Warren, but truly there was a character that was absolutely Pocahontas in a way, or the President of the Galaxy in Dances with Wolves. I really liked that character. I thought she was well played. I thought she was beautiful, and I just enjoyed her. I enjoyed everything. I loved everything about the Mandalorian episode. I thought it was really well directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, and I've chosen at least through the end of the year to embrace Star Wars and bring back the Star Wars nerd that I was in my youth. And look, I still get a kick out of getting Star Wars action figures and building Star Wars models. And why not just choose the joy, people? Choose the joy. It is the season of joy. It's the time for miracles, as Hans Gruber said in Nakatomi Plaza. He told Theo that he should have faith. And I think we should all, at least till 2020, enjoy what we're getting. We're getting Star Wars on a weekly basis. We're getting a new Star Wars film. Why not love it? Why not? I think we should love it. It's a choice. It's a tough choice. I know. It's hard. But I think we can do it. Now, that said, first of all, let me jump into the chats first, and then I got letters, people. I'm still trying to catch up. I get so many letters for all y'all, but as you can see, I am, in fact, very excited about the Rise of Skywalker and the Mandalorian. And Anthony Gonzalez says, where did Leia get her Breen uniform and helmet? Anthony is making a, I've always thought that what you're talking about, I would imagine, is Bausch, the bounty hunter disguise that Leia takes on in Return of the Jedi. Bausch looks very similar to what the Breen looked like in Star Trek Deep Space Nine during the Dominion War. I've always thought that, and I'm sure they based the Breen off Bausch, because why not? It's cool. I like that. Alexander Wilson is here. He says, what is the difference between Apocalypse Now, Redux, and the Final Cut? I'm trying to figure out which one is the right one to buy. Well, Alexander, let me tell you, you need to buy the 4K of Final Cut because it has all 3 versions of the movie in it and the amazing documentary Hearts of Darkness, a Filmmaker's Apocalypse, that utilized Eleanor Coppola's many, many, many hours of footage. So get that. I'm going to do a year-end wrap-up of my favorite physical media releases of the year. By the way, my God, Slaughterhouse 5 is being put out by Arrow. George Roy Hill's adaptation of Kurt Vonnegut's book, Slaughterhouse 5, one of my favorite science fiction movies of the 70s. Valerie Perrine and the Planet Tralfamadore. Billy Pilgrim being unstuck in time. Man, do I love that movie, and I'm finally getting it on Blu-ray. Very, very excited. So, Alexander, the difference between the versions of the movie is Apocalypse Now Redux added, I want to say almost an hour, but probably not that much, added an hour to the original version of Apocalypse Now, and there's just a lot more to it. There's the famous French plantation sequence that is, you got to watch. Final Cut is a revised version of Redux. It's shorter. It takes out a lot of what I thought was the fat and there's a lot of snippets of things that Final Cut kept that I really liked from Redux. My favorite version of Apocalypse Now is still the theatrical version, if only because I do think that one of the things about Apocalypse Now is, for those of you who know it, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. There's a point in the movie where you never get out of the boat. Never get out of the boat. Sure as shit, goddamn right. Going to get mangoes was a bad idea. For those of you who don't know Apocalypse Now, you'll find out what that means. But if you do know, you understand that going out and getting mangoes was probably not the best idea. But so that's really the difference. Redux puts in a lot of stuff, and I think it really hurts the pace of the movie. And there's a lot of meandering that I think you already get. They sort of belabor the point. And that's why Apocalypse Now Redux was revisited. It was because during the 90s, there was a rough cut of Apocalypse Now that somebody had found on VHS or had got out, and people were seeing it. So Coppola went back and revisited the film. I still think the theatrical version is best because there's one scene from Redux that is left in Final Cut. There's a lot of extra snippets in Final Cut that I think is great, but it might be ultimately maybe the best version of Apocalypse Now is Final Cut for various reasons. It all comes down to the French plantation sequence that was not in the theatrical cut, but there's a lot of little extra snippets that I love that I wish were in the theatrical but aren't. But look, man, that is one of the cheapest. It's 3 different versions of the film. It's chock-a-block full of extras. It's one of the greatest physical media releases, not just of this year, but any year. So I cannot recommend Apocalypse Now Final Cut more highly. It gets my highest Robservations recommendation. Buy it, buy it, buy it. You won't be disappointed. Stubble McShave says, Lord of the Rings have elves and old men with beard. Wait, Lord of the Rings have elves and old man with beard Christmas movie. Lord of the Rings have, I don't know what you mean. Lord of the Rings have elves and old man. Are you talking about me? Anyway, by the way, Erasmus Toys just released their Elrond figure, at least pictures of it. Got to get that. I've always wanted an Elrond figure. I want him to fight my Hot Toys Neo figure because they haven't made a Mr. Smith yet. So what can you do? The Richard says, Aloha R&B, I got you the Hawk. What can you tell us about it in Space 1999? Well, okay. For those of you who don't know, Gerry Anderson was famous in the UK for making what he called super marionation genre shows. He began with Supercar, which is a flying car, and there are puppets. There are puppets that stood in for people, but they were big puppets. They were super marionettes, and you could see the wires on them, but they had radio-controlled mouths, and they would build gigantic sets for these puppets. I mean, they're miniature sets, but they're pretty big. So Gerry Anderson had done in the late 50s, he started with Supercar, then he made Fireball XL5, which was a space show. Then he made Stingray, which was an undersea show. Then he made Thunderbirds, which is, of course, the most famous thing he did. Then after Thunderbirds, there was Captain Scarlet. And after Captain Scarlet, there was Joe 90 about a kid, a super agent kid. Now, here's a funny thing. When I was a kid growing up, you couldn't see that nobody in America played Gerry Anderson's super marionette shows, so I never saw them. I was aware that they existed because you could buy. There were 2 die-cast toy companies out of the UK. There was Corgi and there was Dinky. Now, Corgi made cool cars. Like, that's how I got my Lotus, my John Player Special Formula One Lotus. They made a really cool Italian police Porsche. Corgi was more planes, more cars, vehicles, things like that. But they were great, very cool. They had lots of cool sports cars. Dinky, however, specialized more in, they had cars too, but they had different kinds of cars. They had emergency vehicles. They had planes. They had all kinds of things, but they also made licensed die-cast metal toys. And they had them for Thunderbirds. They had them for Joe 90. They had them for Captain Scarlet. They made the Spectrum Pursuit vehicle. They even did an Enterprise and a Klingon battle cruiser. And of course, that's how I knew them. Now, that's how I knew those. That's how I learned about Gerry Anderson. I was like, who made these? So Gerry Anderson's first live action show, which is the first time I really encountered any of his programming, was a show that was shot between 1969 and 1971 called UFO. It was Gerry Anderson's first live action program. It was very expensive to make. It only ran 26 episodes, but UFO was set in 1980. It started in 70, but it documented the era between 70 and 80, but it was mostly set in 1980, and it was about Shadow, the organization Shadow, the supreme headquarters of the Alien Defense Organization, or Shadow. They were headquartered beneath a movie studio in the UK, and they were a multinational organization that all the governments of the world funded, and they were waging a secret, a covert war against a dying alien race that was coming to Earth, basically stealing people and parting them out. their organs, things like that. And it was a very dark show. It was a very adult show, very somber. And that was the first Gerry Anderson show. And the Dinky Toys made the Interceptors and the Mobiles, the Shadow Mobiles, and Ed Straker's car from UFO, which was awesome. Well, instead of making a second season of UFO, they retooled it and they turned it into Space 1999, which was actually going to be in continuity. It was sort of they didn't really get into this in Space 1999, but it ran 2 seasons, I think 48 episodes, and it was 75, 76. And the first season of UFO, again, is very dark and very weird. And the premise of the show is that all the nuclear waste in the world is being stored on the dark side of the moon. There's a problem. All that nuclear waste explodes and it blows the moon out of Earth's orbit. And as the show moves on, sort of, it's insinuated that perhaps the divine intervention of Supreme Being is pushing the moon further and further away. Its journey is being sent. Somebody's watching over Moon Base Alpha, which is the moon base. And of course, the ubiquitous ships on that show were the Eagle transporters. Now, the Eagle transporters, here's an Eagle transporter. Actually, this is Commissioner Simmons, VIP Eagle from the pilot episode Breakaway. You also see an Alpha tank, a defensive tank. And Eagles were when I was a kid, other than the Starship Enterprise, this was pre-Star Wars, the coolest spaceship. Still to this day, I'm a fiend for Eagles. You can see one right there. That's a 22-inch Eagle from Product Enterprises from back in the day. I love Eagles. I've had Eagles since I was a kid. Dinky Toys made Eagles. They were great. And I love the Eagles. But there was one episode of Space 1999's first season called War Games. And there was a derivation of the Eagles, the Hawks, the battle version of the Eagle. Eagles can be lab Eagles. They can be transport Eagles. Like that was the VIP Eagle with the orange. But the Hawks are built for battle. But the only time we ever saw them in Space 1999, they were being employed by aliens. They were used by aliens, and they are great. And the company Round 2 they have put out new model kits. They first released the old MPC version of the Eagles, and then they did a 22-inch version, an accurate model kit of the Eagle that's incredible. And they just released brand new 14-inch model kits of the Eagles that are great. But they also repopped. A repop is when they go back and they take an old model and they put it back out. They use the old molds. They repopped. MPC made Hawks. And of course, they sell these at like Walmart's, but nobody's buying them because kids don't build models anymore. And of course, what kid even knows what the Hawk is from a TV show that is 44 years old? I mean, I don't know. Who cares? But the Hawks are great, and you gotta love Eagles. And if you are interested, a company called 1612 that I just showed you, their latest release, has been making die-cast Eagles, both in the 44-inch version, the studio scale, which were like $2,500. They're 2,500 pounds. I didn't get on that, even though I would have if I had that kind of money. But let me tell you, that's a lot of ad revenue and super chats, and I don't think I could ever justify that expense unless I was a millionaire, and I would have bought them all. But Eagles are great. So I love Space 1999, and I do think it's either streaming on Amazon. I think it is. I think it's streaming on Amazon now. The first season of Space 1999, it's a little deliberately paced, but I really like the show. They changed it in the second season. They brought over American producer Fred Freiberger, who ruined the third season of Star Trek. He sort of ruined the second season of Space 1999. So that is what Space 1999 is, the Richard, in a nutshell. But it's a pretty interesting science fiction show. And what's so cool about it is Brian Johnson, who was the visual effects supervisor, who later went on to be the visual effects supervisor for Empire Strikes Back. The same Derek Meddings and Brian Johnson, that Gerry Anderson model work that you'd seen through his entire career was brought to the next level with UFO and especially Space 1999. And if you're a guy, girls I'm sure might like it too. I don't know how into Eagles they would be, but if it was just that model work still holds up, and Space 1999 is a really, really good looking program. It's just, again, it's deliberately paced and the storylines are a little goofy, and you'll be asking yourself, I can only imagine what Willow Yang would say if she wrote an analysis of Space 1999. She would wonder, okay, let's say the moon did get blown out of Earth's orbit. How long would it take to even leave the solar system, much less find another planet? That is very valid, but that's when I say it was divine intervention and space warps and all kinds of crazy sci-fi stuff that allows Moonbase Alpha and our moon to move beyond our solar system. But it's really interesting. The first season has some great episodes. The first season also has the single scariest episode of television ever when you're 8 years old. And that is, of course, Dragon's Domain. Still, that was the first time I ever heard Adagio in anything. I heard it later in Rollerball. I'm like, oh my God, that's the piece of music they used in Space 1999. So anyway, check it out. Watch Space 1999. Big Chief Studios out of the UK is doing a great John Koenig, played, of course, by Martin Landau. They're doing a great 6-scale figure. Good stuff. So there you go. I hope that was a good enough overview of Space 1999. Loquacious Primate is here. Says, it can be hard to enjoy something when the creators insult you. I'm not a fan of Disney Star Wars, but I wouldn't be as sour if they hadn't taken shots at fans. Look, I totally get that. I totally understand that. But think of what the fan community's been doing to them. I mean, I get it, but my God, I mean, you think that as much as look, if somebody makes a movie that I don't think is good, I'm happy to criticize it. However, my criticism is always tempered with the fact that I do understand how difficult it is to make a great film. My problem with these great franchises is I just don't think the people making them are doing their homework. You know, I think once they get a franchise, they want to make it their own, which I understand as a creative person myself, but they shouldn't be doing that. You know, and when something has existed for 40 years or 50 years plus, like Star Wars and Star Trek have respectively, you know, I think the creators owe it to themselves to honor the fan base. However, I also think that we as fans, I mean, you know, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars making this stuff. And I'm not just saying we should eat anything that's shoveled out to us, but I do think it's important that we remember that there are people, they are trying to do their best. They are trying to do their best. But, you know, taking shots at the fans, we are, the fan community is not exactly practicing Emily Post manners when it comes to our creators. And I certainly haven't. And I'm guilty of it as every other person. But I do think at one point you've got to stop and be like, you know, I guarantee you that everybody at Lucasfilm and J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio and all the actors and ILM and everybody who's worked on The Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens, they're trying to give us the best movies they can. It's just when J.J. Abrams, who I don't think is as talented as I would like him to be, as evidenced by multiple his movies, but I'm pulling for the guy. Like every time I'm like, please, this time I think everything you've learned, allow it to gel and allow. I want The Rise of Skywalker to stick the landing, maybe more than any other movie I've ever seen. And when I saw that 30-second Duel of the Fates TV spot, I'm like, oh man, you know, I am not interested, or am I invested in any of the new characters? It was a great misstep not to put all of the old classical legacy characters together in a film and have them have one last hurrah. And come on, Tallulah. There's family members over here. Oh, you're gonna bark? Is that what you're gonna do? You're gonna bark? Does that mean I have to give you a cookie on camera? I think it does. There you go. There's a cookie for you and a cookie for you. Everybody's equal in this house. I'll take out one cookie for each of you, so you get two. And if you want them, these organic cookies, you get them. Okay? You don't even reach up for it. Anyway, these dogs, the most spoiled dogs in the world, but I love them. Anyway, I know they're trying to make the best they can. And everybody's spending a lot of money. Do I think that we should just suck it up? No! But Hey, man, you're not getting more cookies. I just want these movies to be great. I hope they're great. But you're right. But I think there is a sense of fan entitlement, just like there's a sense of canine entitlement when I do my shows, that we need to get over. We need to get over. And it's weird because pre-internet it didn't really exist. I mean, I would bitch and moan and complain, but when I was a young man, I was always hoping that everything I saw was good. And when it wasn't good, I remember going to see Space Hunter, Adventures in the Forbidden Zone in 3D with Michael Ironside as the overdog and young Molly Ringwald. And I really wanted it to be great. I really wanted it to be great. And when it wasn't great, I'm like, well, that was disappointing, but I didn't get angry about it. I know Star Wars is a different thing. It's on a whole different level. But, when you grow up watching James Bond movies and some are good and some are bad, and the Planet of the Apes movies, certainly the original 5 are a group of films that certainly are of diminishing returns. I guess I learned to not sweat the small stuff and try and find enjoyment. Even Star Trek, my beloved Star Trek, spotty at best. There are a lot more unsatisfying Star Trek movies to me than there are satisfying movies. In fact, I think I would dare say less than half of the Star Trek movies are satisfying to me. But I still go with open eyes and open arms and want to embrace them. But nowadays, our fandom, we don't know what it's like. If somebody gave you $200 million, could you deliver? I don't know. But in this case, I get where you're coming from, Loquacious Primate. I get where you're coming from. But I am going to say that at least until January 1st, I'm embracing my inner Star Warrior. I'm allowing myself to get excited, just like I do when every James Bond movie comes out. I mean, the last movie I got, the last 3 Bond films, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, and Spectre, disappointed me to varying degrees after the high point of Casino Royale. Still enjoy watching them, I love watching all Bond movies. I find something to like about all of them. I'm hoping Rise of Skywalker is going to be good. I really, really do. I like what I'm seeing. I like that one scene, riding in the desert. I like that new trailer. I liked hearing Duel of the Fates. I hope we hear that in the final movie. That would be really cool. I don't know if we will. Dan V900 says, I like the new episode of The Mandalorian, but it was incredibly similar to an episode of Clone Wars, which was an homage to Seven Samurai. It's weird because Filoni is involved in both, and it was done again. Yeah, I think this whole thing is an homage. I've realized it's a test bed for new technologies to see how they can move forward, making Star Wars for both television and movies. I get it. I totally understand. And I'm enjoying it. It's to me, it's a little trifle. We are going to get the heavy Mandalorian hot toy figure, though. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Bob Tozy, what do you suppose Picard's mission report or log entry was following Cupid? Yeah, that Cupid was my least favorite episode of the Q episodes of the Next Generation. That's a good question. What was any of Picard's mission reports? I mean, the one thing, what's very funny to me about Q episodes, the whole character of Q, and it's the character that to me works the least. It's the thing about Star Trek: The Next Generation. I both loved and hated. I love John Delancey's portrayal of Q, but the whole premise behind Q was outlandish, and I don't think it belonged in Star Trek. It was one thing if Trelane was more of an omnipotent alien and came from an omnipotent race, or Charlie X, same kind of those kind of characters with those kind of godlike powers. But the thing about Q was, in a way, he really sort of was God. Even the wormhole aliens, the prophets, don't strike me as, I still believe in them. Whereas Q, I'm like, okay, this is a total fantasy character in a Star Trek context that I came to embrace because I just thought Delancey was so much fun in the role that I'll go with it. And then they would do cool things like, oh, in Q Who, Guinan has a rivalry with Q. So I don't know what his mission report would be, honestly. But it certainly would raise a lot of eyebrows at Starfleet. Yeah. I'd have to think about that. Willow Yang says, I've never heard of Jimmy Hoffa prior to The Irishman. Was he a well-known figure when you were younger? Absolutely, he was a well-known figure when I was younger. One of my dad's best friends was the head of the Hollywood Teamsters. My dad had many friends that were like that. And Jimmy Hoffa, yes, he was a well-known figure. Of course, if you liked, I thought Jack Nicholson played Jimmy Hoffa in Danny DeVito's film, Hoffa. So if you watch The Irishman, which, by the way, I'm going to talk about more in depth, I loved The Irishman. Once again, it's very funny reading a lot of takes. I thought the special effects technology on display was amazing. Was it perfect? No. But let me ask you, folks, what if they used traditional makeup techniques? You know, one of the things I've always been Watchmen, not the new TV series, but Zack Snyder's Watchmen. I thought that the Richard Nixon makeup was so obviously a makeup. Some of those makeups were so obvious. The elderly, well, the older Silk Spectre, all of those characters, the makeups were clearly makeups. And did these digital makeups better? I thought so. I bought into it. A lot of people are like, well, we were in the uncanny valley. Were we, though? I mean, I've been a special effects junkie my whole life, and I know when special effects are being employed, and I thought it was pretty flawless, pretty great. Of course, you can always tell there's something sort of off, but it's very funny because we just accept people wearing makeup, but now we're going to have to accept digital de-aging. And I think for what we've seen up until now, certainly if you go back and watch Tron Legacy and watch the digital de-aging they did on Jeff Bridges, we have come miles. We have come light years from where we were back then. But anyway, thought it was good. I love The Irishman. I think it's a masterpiece. I stand by my assertion that it is going to win the Best Picture for the year. But we'll see. We'll see if anyone is prejudicial against Netflix. I don't know. But yes, I did know a lot about Jimmy Hoffa growing up. You heard a lot about him and his disappearance when I was a kid. And that's why when the movie came out, I was really keen to see. I'm talking about Hoffa, Danny DeVito's Hoffa, where Jack Nicholson played Hoffa. I really wanted to see it, only to learn more about Jimmy Hoffa. But I loved Pacino as Hoffa. My God, Pacino was awesome. Loved it. I thought Pacino was great as Hoffa. Dan V900 is back. My problem with the way they fly now clip, my problem with the they fly now clip is that jump troopers appear in Battlefront and Rebels. JJ just said that Terrio knows more about Star Wars with watching the shows and being well read. It breaks canon. Yeah, you know, it's again, here is my biggest problem as a fan. When I see this kind of thing, I thought it was cool, but I mean, the Mandalorian, Boba Fett has a backpack, and like you said, that you've got them in Battlefront and you've got them in Rebels. It's like they don't do their research. And as a fan, as a Star Wars fan, and as a Star Trek fan, I think that the biggest disappointment for me is when you see that kind of stuff, you realize that the people that are making Star Wars know less than you as a fan. And I feel that's the real problem. There's so much material now that's out there that even casual fans, if you're a gamer, and who isn't a gamer, and you haven't been, if you're not watching this stuff, like, did J.J. Abrams sit down and watch the Clone Wars and watch Rebels? Probably not. And my problem with these filmmakers now is they're just not doing their work. Like, if you're going to write a new Star Wars script, and I know this was the production schedule was rushed, I'm like, I would insist, if I ran Star Trek, I would personally, if they put me in charge of a Star Wars, or pardon me, if they put me in charge, if I was made the guru, the Kevin Feige of Star Trek, I would stop everything. I mean, I know I probably couldn't. And I would spend a month, I would hire my creatives, and I would spend a month teaching an immersive course on Star Trek canon. I would, and I would say, look, one of the great things as creators is that there is this Star Trek canon that exists. And I'd be the first person to admit, I would say, hey, Many of the writers, as I learned when I spent 3 years of my life immersed in the making of Star Trek: The Next Generation for the documentaries that are on the Blu-rays, I interviewed everybody. I was there for a very long period of time. I don't know how many people have spent 3 years interviewing all of the creatives involved from the top down, but I certainly did, and I already brought my vast Star Trek knowledge to the table. So I would teach a Star Wars boot camp, and I would give homework, and I'm like, look, and these are the things that you should know. And one of the problems is, now I'm not saying that you're locked into obviously Star Trek has never, and Star Wars canon has always been fast and loose depending on what you're looking at. But one of the problems is when you have millions of people buying certain video games like Battlefront and playing it, what you're doing is when you make jokes, like I had no problem with that clip. But even when everyone says, oh, C-3PO says they're fly now. I mean, they think, J.J. Abrams and company think they've made something cool and new and unique. They have not. And that scene is played out that it's unique that stormtroopers are flying just because we've never seen it in a movie before. But like you said, it's been in other things, and we've seen them in animation, we've seen them in video games, so they can have them fly and have it be kick-ass. But when it becomes a self-satisfied joke, like they fly now, well, they've flown before. It's just you apparently didn't keep up with current events. And that's what I hate. And as a fan, but I'm not going to hate on it. I'm not going to get mad. I'm going to love Star Wars. And maybe they just didn't know. Because remember, it was the First Order. They haven't flown. So it's the First Order troops that haven't flown. And, when stormtroopers are flying before, or Mandalorians are flying before, that was 30 years ago when they used to have a show, but not for Lola. Still in the dress she used to wear, faded feathers in her hair, she sits there, so refined. Anyway, that was a weird segue into Copacabana, but that's that's what you get here on Robservations. That's problematic, and for fans, I know it makes our gums bleed. But you're absolutely right, and I think it does break canon, and it's annoying. Jay Canada's here. Jay Canada says, "Good afternoon, Rob. Listen, do you smell something? Love that line. Curious." What are your expectations for the forthcoming Ghostbusters movies? When when you say, do you smell something? You know what I think? I think, because I just watched clips this morning, I think it's actually from The Big Short. It's when Adam Bennett says, do you smell something? Cologne? No, money. But yes, do you smell something? That's very funny. And on Airplane. Listen, do you smell something? Yes. I love all that. And Ghostbusters. What are my expectations for the forthcoming Ghostbusters movies? Well, I love Ghostbusters. I do have the Blitzway 6-scale versions of the Ghostbusters, all 4 of them. I love Ghostbusters, and I just hope it's good. I hope it's the Creed of Ghostbusters movies. As many of you viewers who are here with me a lot, you know that I always talk about Creed, and I hold up Ryan Coogler's Creed for somebody that can come in, a new filmmaker, revitalize a franchise, and yet still pay the ultimate respect to that franchise. You create new characters, new situations, but you have Rocky Balboa, and you prove with your script that you've done your research. Ryan Coogler, as people I've heard me say a million times, when apparently his mother had cancer and was ailing, he and his father bonded together and drowned their sorrows in Rocky movies together. And his love of the Rocky franchise led to him approaching Sylvester Stallone and making Creed. And I'm sure that's why he was tapped, not just because Creed's a great movie, but it showed how Coogler could work within the framework of a previously existing franchise. I think it's one of the best. If I had an old, venerable franchise, I'd look no further than Creed to know exactly what I should be doing with that franchise. So I would hope that this new Ghostbusters is the Creed. I mean, it's all in the family. It's Ivan Reitman's son, Jason Reitman, making the film. I want it to be good. I hope there was what I loved most about the first Ghostbusters is you had these characters that took themselves very seriously. Bill Murray did not. He was in there mostly for a lark. But the way the characters were grounded in the real world, like I believed that Egon and Spengler were they were professors. They were nerdy professors, and their friend Bill Murray was sort of bemused at the whole thing. And then you were grounded with those guys, and then you could play the ghosts for laughs and do all that outlandish stuff, and it worked. It worked. And that's a hard thing to do. And that becomes the humor becomes, even though it was totally over the top, it became situational because you were with those guys. The way they're established and set up. I never felt that the women, for instance, in Paul Feig's Ghostbusters, I didn't believe them. They were caricatures from the get-go. And I think that was the real problem with the film, is not that there were female Ghostbusters, it's that they never grounded them in reality the way the original Ghostbusters were grounded in reality. And I just didn't believe them. And I hope this time that the next generation, whatever it's going to be called, I just want that film to work. I want to believe in those characters. I want to believe in that world. And if it's a continuation, which it is, they say all the remaining Ghostbusters are coming back, that what is the world? How does the world exist, 35 years on, after they know ghosts are real? Once you've had a ghost assault on New York the way you had in both Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2, how does science respond? What is the world like of today when ghosts are real? Do they have a ghost character that comes back and aids the Ghostbusters in their quest? I don't know. I think it would be kind of dope. That's what I hope for it. I hope it's good. I want it to be good. I want to love it. Mark Chure here's Mark C's here. By the way, thanks for supporting the channel, Mark. I very much appreciate that. Mark says, the parallel. You say make an effort to love the Disney trilogy is like hearing a lover of Star Trek Discovery telling you to make an effort to love it. My opinion, they're bad movies that don't stay true to canon or character. Well, here's the thing. My take on The Last Jedi is I really like what Rian Johnson did. The fact that, Luke was already a hero. He defeated the Emperor. Well, he got Vader to defeat the Emperor for him. So Luke already was, to me, a hero. I kind of liked the Unforgiven aspects of it because I love Westerns, and I loved Unforgiven, that Luke was sort of disillusioned by what went on. And I found that fascinating. And I always thought that what the trilogy should have been is what happens when you were a hero and then you become disillusioned and then you eventually find yourself again and become even a greater hero than you could have been possibly before. But one of my biggest problems, not with the Disney trilogy, is what they did. It's what they didn't do. And what they didn't do is we've had so many rich stories in the Star Wars universe, beginning with the Thrawn trilogy and the Dark Empire comics, which I love. I went back and read the first Dark Empire, the 6 issues of Dark Empire. I'm like, why didn't they just make that movie? It's like, go ahead and do that. And all the rich characters that we'd seen in the extended universe, they'd already done so many things that, let's face it, were far more interesting than we got with this Disney trilogy. I mean, that's the real heartbreaking thing, is that if anybody did even a cursory glance at what had been done before, but nobody was going to do that because then they wouldn't get paid for that. If they were going to go adapt comic books or the EU books or something, or an amalgamation or a pastiche of all of it, they wouldn't. Why would they get them? Why pay the expensive prices you pay to get J.J. Abrams to come make these movies if you're just going to go adapt previously existing comics or books, which I would have done. I would have had no shame in that. I would have cherry-picked all the stuff that I thought was good and used it. But yeah, I think that said, we can complain all we want, Mark. I'm completely with you. I don't disagree with you. I agree with you actually 100%. But that said, I'm getting another Star Wars movie. And for the time being, until I want to sit down and do a post-mortem and decide what do I think of this Disney trilogy, I like Rogue One. Rogue One gets better every single time I watch it. I'm glad to get that, even though I think the end of it doesn't make a whole lot of sense with the beginning of Star Wars. But I like Rogue One. It's not as good as I would give it a solid B+. And everything else, as far as Disney Star Wars is, and I'd give The Mandalorian a B, maybe B+. So I'm still waiting to get Star Wars. For me, Star Wars and Empire are both Star Wars. They're both A+, I would say. And Star Wars, ever since then, has been diminished. I would give Jedi a B, but it should have been an A. And I'm going to go into this movie. I want to like it. I want this to be the best of those movies, and I hope to really, really dig it. You know, if the Disney trilogy so far has been Mad Max, which I like. Actually, I like Mad Max more than I like the Disney trilogy, but I want this movie to be the Road Warrior, you know, or Fury Road. I'm hoping, but you're not wrong. They're not good movies. They don't stay true to canon or character. But that said, we have them and they exist. And I'm hoping that this third movie is better. And I hope it in hindsight makes the other previous films in the sequel trilogy better movies. I don't know if it will. I don't have. I don't know. Timula the Spider Monkey says, do you have a favorite J.G. Ballard book? As much as I love Crash and Empire of Sun, The Drowned World. The Drowned World is great. High Rise is great too. And there's one other I'm missing. There's, you know what? There's another J.G. Ballard book. And why am I drawing a blank on the title? Hang on. I'm going to find out what that is. I want to tell you what it is. As I go and look him up, because there's the one where they're stuck on no, what's it called? It's they're on like the medians. I forget. The atrocity exhibit. Concrete Island. I like Concrete Island too. That's another book I really enjoyed. But those are the ones I've read. The ones you mentioned: Concrete Island, High Rise, Crash, Empire of the Sun, and the Atrocity Exhibition. I think are the only Ballard I've actually read. I think. But I'm a fan of his work. I mean, if you want to read some crazy dystopian future shock novels from the 70s, those are ones you can't go wrong with. I mean, Crash is just such an out there book, and I can't wait to get the 4K restoration of it. The Richard says, you mentioned small sets, walk down a block to the next adventure. That's what I said about the Mandalorian, the second episode. It seems like, well, the Mandalorians, the Empire, the bounty hunters, they're all in the same street. Well, it's a more fun town than Mos Eisley is, let me tell you that. I like this. It's more ground level. Mando episode 4 features a threat, which had previously in films been a joke. They killed it here, though. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. It just seemed a little small, you know, that it's all, even the battle took place on one street. And I understand from a production standpoint where they're coming from, but the show just doesn't have that much scope, you know. And even the episode today, I will say that the threat, the good guys and the bad guys in this episode seem pretty close together. Like you can walk there. And there's just things that mystify me about the writing on this show. And, you know, the Mandalorian, he just leaves his ship unattended. Why do that? That seems to me like, unless you had a force field around it or something, why would you leave your ship unattended? He's big on that. And I don't get it. Alexander Wilson says, do you get any money if I buy Free Enterprise on Amazon? It blew me away when I saw it on HBO when I was 12. It was a go-to for six sick days. Well, Alexander Wilson, I have never made 1 cent off Free Enterprise. Everyone thinks, my God. And here's the problem. You don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. And when we were making Free Enterprise, I was being paid. We were also setting up a company, a film company. I got paid a weekly salary. And within that weekly salary, I worked on 2 films. I made Free Enterprise and I made a movie. I was originally a producer, and I made a movie called The Specials. And well, I'll just flat out tell you. I'll tell you the story of what happened. So I had started a company with Mark Altman and Dan Bates. And we had a financier named Mark Gottwald, who was bankrolling the company, and there was the 3 of us working on it. Now, Mark had never worked in film before. He was working in publishing, and he lost. Sci-Fi Universe was sold out from under him. And so we were making Free Enterprise, and we made the movie, and we were putting it out. It was playing festivals. It was winning festival awards, but it had not sold for distribution. And unbeknownst to me, as the director, co-writer, and editor of the film, unbeknownst to me, behind my back, Mark Altman and Dan Bates hired another editor and recut Free Enterprise without my knowledge because the film hadn't sold. And Dan, as a producer, was trying to get the movie sold. But I didn't know they were doing that. They kept it a secret from me. However, where they were cutting the movie was the post-production facility I had been working out of for a long time. And a friend of mine called me up and said, "Why are they recutting Free Enterprise without you?" And I was like, "What?" And so I made a mistake. I've sat on this information for a number of weeks. And then Mark called me and told me what happened. He got it off his chest because he was horribly riddled with guilt, considering he and I made Free Enterprise together every step of the way. And then I went in to talk to Dan Bates about it, and I was pissed because we were producing the specials at the time that James Gunn wrote and was starring, and that Craig Mazin, who created Chernobyl, was directing. I was a producer on that movie, and I had been sitting on this, and I finally went in to Dan Bates and I said, "What are you doing? We're all supposed to have a company here, and you guys are out recutting Free Enterprise, a movie that won Best Film at the AFI Film Festival and won Best Screenplay. We'd won audience awards, and we hadn't." And he says to me, "Well, I just didn't want to deal with you, so I'm like, didn't want to deal with me. You're my partner." So I said to Dan, and this is the mistake that I made, kids. The mistake I made was, I said, "All right, Dan, I think we all need to sit down. We all need to sit down with Mark Gottwald, our financier, and we need to figure out how we're going to move this company forward, because this certainly isn't the way to do it." And I knew more about the movie business than the two of them did, even though Dan Bates had produced a few low-budget features, and Altman had not worked on any movies aside from Free Enterprise and what we were doing, the specials. And by the way, Dan made that deal on the specials when Mark and I were in Europe with Free Enterprise. So I said this. I said, "Dan, I temporarily resign from this company until we sit down with our financier and we figure out how to move forward." I said that in the morning, and I was pissed. And keep in mind, I'd done all that work on Free Enterprise. Later that afternoon, my friends said, well, Dan Bates called me and said, "We accept your resignation. You're out." So we still hadn't sold the movie yet. So I ended up, that was it. My weekly stipend, my weekly paycheck was gone. My friends said I was out of the company because they fucking lied to me. That not only did they lie to me, they lied to me on a daily basis. They hired another editor that, by the way, I had replaced on a project for Dan Bates, and they lied. They lied to me, and Mark Altman stood by and let it happen. But you know what? I don't blame Mark, because Mark, the only money we were making was what we were being paid every week. That was it, man. And we had this company, by the way, a company whose name, Mindfire Entertainment, that I'd come up with. And it was, I had made the word. I had said the words. I had said I temporarily resign. There was no coming back from that, even though you would think that with two friends who have your back, they're like, "We understand." Rob was rightfully pissed. He found out we'd been lying to him, and we had re-edited his movie that he co-wrote, directed, and edited himself that was winning awards at festivals. So I was out. And no, to answer your question, I never made one dime off Free Enterprise. Never. And the version of that's on Amazon now is a 4:3 bastardization of a transfer that was made because we had to make a TV version that I oversaw in 1999. And by the way, after I was kicked out of my own company, I still worked on the movie to get it released when it came out on June 4th, 1999. So there's a Hollywood story for you. So yes, I don't make a dime off Free Enterprise. What I would like to do, hopefully one day, I've been trying to raise the money to buy the negative from our producer, because the film has been out of print since 2006. The only way you can get my somewhat approved version of it is to buy the 2-disc Anchor Bay DVD that came out in 2006. It's never been out on Blu-ray. By the way, Mark and I are friends, and Mark and I teamed up again to make Free Enterprise 2, which was called Free Enterprise: The Wrath of Shatner, back in 2010. you let bygones be bygones. You just remember that when you work again, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate. I certainly had my ducks in a row. But even then, Mark went ahead and he was going to make a TV series of Free Enterprise, and he replaced me as the director of that, even though it never got off the ground. So, but we're still the Inglorious Trexperts, and I occasionally guest on his show. And he did let me direct 5 episodes of Femme Fatales. So, you can have complex relationships with people. But at the end of the day, to answer your question, nope, I never made one dime off Free Enterprise, even though I produced both the 2006 Anchor Bay disc and the original DVD. And I worked very hard on that film, free of charge, to make sure it got to the public. What does that say about me? I could write a whole book about my experiences doing Free Enterprise and Agent Cody Banks, which is an even better story. But you continue on. Stubble McShave says, I saw the Untouchables yesterday. Love De Niro's Capone. Have you never seen the Untouchables before, Stubble? I love the Untouchables. Brian De Palma's Untouchables is great. I mean, the stylization of it and how he utilizes Eisenstein's The Odessa Step sequence from the Battleship Potemkin in the movie. It's amazing. I love the Untouchables. I love Ennio Morricone's score. I love the cast. Of course, I love Connery in it. I love Andy Garcia, and I love Kevin Costner. What a movie. Such a good movie. I love that. Rick Berg says, I don't know if you ever noticed, but the AT-AT driver paid homage to UFO when Veers asked him distance to the power generator. He said 17.28, which is the way they talked in UFO. I don't know. I never saw it like that. That might be true. I don't know. Maybe it is true because there are people, there's a lot of people in England that worked on UFO, especially at the time of Empire. And of course it was Brian Johnson. So you never know. That could be true. I'd like to think that's true. I mean, yeah, maybe it's just a British way of talking, but I'll tell you, anything to me, everything is an homage to UFO. I love it. I love UFO so much. Now, speaking of Star Trek, I have a letter. Star Wars. Dean Mikatich is here. Dean Mikatich says, hey, Rob and the Post-Geek Singularity. Today, I wanted to write to you about Disney's purchase of Star Wars, or more specifically, Lucasfilm. Now, before Disney had bought Marvel and Star Wars, the company had a reputation for being for girls. Don't get me wrong, boys like the films and TV shows, but with Disney promotion of the Disney princesses, it got this reputation. To appeal more to boys, Disney bought Marvel, something that was offered to Paramount first, and I bet that is something they're kicking themselves over on not taking now, and Star Wars. Now, we all know that George Lucas sold Star Wars for $4 billion, but did he really sell Star Wars to Lucasfilm, which included Star Wars? The reason I ask this is because when this sale went through, Lucasfilm and all of its subsidiaries became the property of Disney. When Lucas created Lucasfilm in 1971, it was to be his production company to make his own films. After making American Graffiti, he started work on Star Wars. As this was done through his own production company, the rights for Star Wars are theirs. Well, actually, that isn't true. Star Wars was financed partially by Fox. That's why Fox retained the rights to release Star Wars. So Star Wars was not entirely produced by Lucasfilm. Along with the purchase of Lucasfilm, Disney got the rights to all the films that they had made, which also includes another well-known franchise, Indiana Jones. They also got all of Lucasfilm's subsidiaries, which include LucasArts, which Disney shut down straight away, Skywalker Sound, and Industrial Light and Magic. There is no doubt that from the Lucasfilm film rights, Star Wars is their biggest moneymaker. But if you look at the other two companies, I would say they are worth at least $1 billion each. While pretty much unknown to people outside the film industry, Skywalker Sound is a leader in the field. They were the ones responsible for creating THX surround sound and have worked on nearly every major film since the 80s. They even won 15 Academy Awards and received 62 nominations. Then you have the company everyone knows about, Industrial Light and Magic. This is the company every major studio in Hollywood and their dog wants as their first choice when it comes to visual effects. Well, they've had also people that rival them. I would say Weta Digital is certainly on par with ILM, and also Digital Domain did some great work. In Industrial Light and Magic were the leaders of miniature and model building work, and with the dawn of computer-generated imagery, they were first to put out a CGI animation in film. This was in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan with the Genesis Project film. Star Trek has used. They also did the first character in Young Sherlock Holmes with the Stained Glass Knight. When ILM was unable to do this work due to the demand, Paramount went with someone else, and you can see the difference in quality. That would be in Star Trek V. Brand Farron's company, it didn't work out well. They were just trying to save money, and they bought into his BS. But anyway, that is not to say the companies brought in to do the VFX are not able to do good work. It's just that they're not as good as ILM. Although I will say this, there especially in the late 80s, ILM did get overextended. And the summer of 1989, when ILM was doing Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and a lot of other things, and even Star Trek IV, where you got the B team, ILM's B team, there's a lot of questionable effects. I mean, the Cetacean Institute, there's jiggly matte paintings. So they're not, I mean, they're great, but when they were overextended in the 80s, there was some shoddy work being done. Like Skywalker Sound, ILM have worked on some of the biggest films and TV shows since the 80s and won a number of awards for this work. So with this in mind, is Star Wars worth $4 billion? I would say no, but Lucasfilm and its subsidiaries are. Well, I don't know. I mean, Star Wars, I once saw a statistic before pre-Disney that they had sold $22 billion in merchandising. I would say that Star Wars absolutely, forget Lucasfilm, which is also a bargain, but Star Wars was definitely worth it. And the fact that already, sure, they have to pay back interest, I'm sure, when they, I don't know if the $4 billion, how much of it was cash or in stock options, but I do think ultimately it was totally worth it, if only for Star Wars. And look, 4 movies later, whether you want to, I mean, even Solo, with the amount of money they spent in addition to the $4 billion, because remember, they spent $4 billion, and then there was the money that was actually spent producing the movies. So you had, between Rogue One, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Solo, you're probably spending at least another $1 billion on producing those films. So they spent, they made a $5 million investment, and then you saw the movies. Look, the fact that Force Awakens was a $2 billion winner, and you don't get all of that $2 billion, but they've done quite well. I mean, Disney, it was a great acquisition, and everyone wants to talk about the fact that, oh, the toys aren't selling. The world of toys and all of that's changing. You know, how much did Jedi Fallen Order do? I mean, it was an incredible investment. The Mandalorian has now become the biggest streaming show of all time, driving people to the service. So they're going to be just fine. It was a great acquisition. And you know what? Whether they do the Cassian Andor series, I'm sure the Obi-Wan series is going to be amazing. I'm sure Rise of Skywalker, barring some hideous disaster, is going to make $1 billion. So again, it is an ongoing concern. Now, when Galaxy's Edge, of course, doesn't become the attraction that it was supposed to be, that isn't Star Wars' fault. I think that had a lot more to do with the fact that other than spending more money at Galaxy's Edge and looking at the Millennium Falcon, once they get Rise of the Resistance in there and they get more interactivity and more stuff to do, it'll all work out in the long run. So absolutely. But anyway, let me continue on. As for Kathleen Kennedy, I did not know her before Disney had taken over Lucasfilm. As you like to say, she's worked on some of the biggest films as a producer before being given Lucasfilm. What sort of a producer was she? Was she able to get the funding for these films, or was she more of a creative producer? Reason I ask, given the decisions she has made when it came to Star Wars, she is far from being a creative. She has not been strong enough to have vision of what this trilogy is, and had left each director to do their own thing. We all know how that turned out. Well, how that turned out so far is that 3 of those movies made over $1 billion. Anyway, I think that George Lucas made her the head of Lucasfilm instead of someone like Dave Filoni, as she is a far better manager than a creative, while Dave Filoni is far better as a creative than a manager. If this is the case, then the state that Star Wars is in with the fan base is not George Lucas's fault or even Kathleen Kennedy's fault. It would be Bob Iger's fault. He would have put or tasked Kathleen Kennedy in getting the current trilogy made so that Disney could have got their money back as fast as they could. What do you think, Rob? Dean M. Well, we've talked a lot about this. First of all, Dave Filoni does not know how to make a feature film. He never made a feature film. Making a feature film is a very difficult proposition. when you're making a feature film, forget what you're making the feature film about. Forget the script and forget the director. Let's just talk about the logistics behind making a large scale feature film, where you people, manpower, and equipment, and all of the stuff. It's like, and depending on how long you're going to shoot, if you're going to shoot for 6 months, managing men and materials, or in case someone doesn't get mad at me, people and materials, human beings and materials, managing that is an art form unto itself. Now, what kills me is when people say, well, is she a creative producer? Well, let me tell you something. Knowing how to get the proper materials, the proper equipment, and all the manpower and all personnel that you need to make movies in foreign countries, there's a lot of creativity that's involved in that. I mean, I understand what people are saying. People are thinking creative in terms of the story and the way the story is told. Well, that's true. That's one bit of producing. But Kathleen Kennedy is a person that knows how to get a movie made. She's moving men and materials. You know, she's hiring people. She's hoping that the visionary directors and the writers, she'll weigh in on those things. But that's not what her job is. Her job is to creatively be able to produce a movie and make sure with the budget they have, they can achieve the vision of the writer and the director that she has decided to throw in the towel with to make the film. So this weird idea when people always talk, because I hear it all the time. I was trying to get a movie set up with Gil Adler, who is the producer of Superman Returns. People are like, well, he's not. He's more of a line producer than a creative producer. I want to punch people in the face who say stuff like that, because what does that mean? You know, when you're shooting a movie that you have 5,000 extras on the streets of Sydney, what do you think figuring out how to shoot all that isn't creative? Now, it's not creative in terms of Superman's canon, but it's certainly creative. You have to know what you're doing to be able to mount a project of that size. Kathleen Kennedy knows how to do that. And it's just amazing to me when people, I'm sure, look, even J.J. Abrams, it did not steep himself in the kind of continuity he probably should have. That's why they're all surprised that stormtroopers can fly using jetpacks that we've seen for 30 years all the way back. Well, even before that, 60 years. It was 60 years ago. You saw Jango Fett use a backpack in Attack of the Clones. And it's like, come on, man. What, jetpacks? A stormtrooper never used one before? I would assume perhaps the First Order just never got around to backpacks. But I think that when it comes right down to it, you have to understand that what movie making is. You know, when you have you need a great producer to get you all the materials that you need to actually fulfill your vision. Now, in Kathleen Kennedy's case, she was remember, she produced movies for David Fincher, for Martin Scorsese, for Robert Zemeckis, not just Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. You know, she worked with some of the greatest filmmakers that are working today of the last 20 years. And she made some really difficult, groundbreaking movies like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Jurassic Park, pioneering new technologies that had never existed before. You know, if you want somebody that understands what ILM can and can't do, Kathleen Kennedy is your person. I mean, if you look at what she tried to do with Lucasfilm, hiring young, new talent, emerging talent, what she obviously didn't get to do with them is get them to work within the studio system or the Lucasfilm system that she needed them to work in. And she just assumed that wouldn't have been a problem because it hadn't been a problem in her life before. That doesn't mean she's a bad producer. But, you know, everyone's going to, while there's a lot of tumult that went along and what happened over at Lucasfilm, you know what? They're 3 for 4 as far as films go, and they're 1 for 1 as in terms of streaming shows. So if you look at 5 projects that have been made, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Solo, Rogue One, and The Mandalorian, that's a pretty damn good track record. So this idea that she's running Lucasfilm into the ground, if you want to concentrate on the stuff that has happened, the birth pangs, as it were, of Disney taking over Star Wars, and they had a completely different agenda than any other time in Star Wars' history, which is basically controlled by one person. I mean, she's had to deal with the studio, deal with the filmmakers, deal with all kinds of things. And despite all the tumult, she's come through it and made it happen. So, I mean, I'm a fan of hers. I've always been a fan of hers. And I find the vitriol that is thrown her way in the fan community it's just distressing because, like so many other things, like I hear people talk about the Snyder Cut. Oh, it's done. The fan community, I just wish more than anything for 2020 that our fan community learns a little bit more about how these things are made from a business perspective. Because I think the reality of the business of Hollywood is something that is lost upon our fan community. And I wish that we were a little bit more aware of it. Flick Brick says, Ray wearing her white hood is everything I wanted. I'll tell you, Flick Brick, I'll tell you. I think the first hot toy figure that I want to buy is Ray in that new outfit she's wearing in Last Jedi. I really like the outfit. I think she looks great. I hope the movie's great. I hope I love it. I want to love it. But you're right. I think she looks damn good. She looks damn good. Zachary King says, loving The Mandalorian. To me, the standalone Star Wars movies have been better than the trilogy movies, though Rogue One was fantastic. I liked Solo also. I really like Rogue One a lot. I wish it was a little longer and we delved into the backstory more. Like I would have seen all those characters. I would like to have seen them in their milieu. Give them like 8 minutes each showing their backstory, like what happened at Jeddah and all that. The Jedi Temple or whatever, and the fall of that. I would like to have seen those things. It would have been the same way we got the beginning with Jyn Erso. That's my only complaint with Rogue One, is that I would have liked to have got to know those characters better. And to do that, I would have liked scenes where we saw each character dealing with what happened to them pre the beginning of the movie. But I like it. The space battle is incredible. I really enjoy a lot of that. I like Solo too. Jamie Cruz says, sucks about free enterprise deal. Possible to do crowdfunding to help buy it back. How much do you guess it would take to get it back in your hands? Well, if producer Mark Gottwald would sell it, I mean, I don't know. First of all, you have to understand that it's kind of like the Snyder Cut. Would it be commercially viable to spend money to buy what I want to do is to buy the negative of free enterprise and to own it. And I think probably to do that, I don't know if he would sell it to me, $250,000 to just buy the whole thing from him. And then I would need about $200,000 to do a whole new cut of the film and do a 4K version of it. So I think, and that's if he would sell it to me for $250,000. Maybe I could get him to sell it to me less, maybe more. I don't know. But then you have to, could I find somebody to buy it? I certainly don't think I could make enough money back. I did a breakdown and a proposal about it, but it would be tough. It would be tough to justify that expense because, first of all, it costs, if you have a movie that was shot on film, it would cost about $120,000 for me to take the negative and transfer it to 4K and all the deleted scenes and what I want to do with the movie. Because I really want to do a whole new cut of the film. And it would be just trim it up. Things I could just make a much better version of a movie. Think of it as my final. I want to do the final frontier cut of Free Enterprise because I think the movie is more relevant now than it was 20 years ago. It was a little ahead of its time, but I just can make the movie a lot better than it is. Just use more coverage that's there. There's the Logan's Run sequence. I shot it to be different than it is. There's much more footage that it wouldn't necessarily be longer. I would just do some more stuff with it. And, I would just do a whole new version of the film. I would really love to do it. And plus I've learned so much about post-production. So I basically $500,000. And the movie only originally cost about $650,000 to shoot. And it was 1.3 after post-production. But yeah, I mean, again, and Mark Gottwald might not want to sell it to me. I hope he would. Or Mark Altman might buy it, and then I'll be in the same position where I'll have to do all this work for free. But I would still do it. I would just like to get Free Enterprise out there in 4K because so far it's the only movie I've directed. And being that it's over 20 years old now, it's almost as if I didn't direct anything again. But I think the fan community has changed so much. There's a lot of people that have never heard of Free Enterprise. And with Shatner's resurgence and people knowing Eric McCormack from Will and Grace, I think if we re-released it, I could do very, very well. And, I've run the numbers and I think I could make it work, but you could never crowdfund that. Nobody would ever crowdfund that money. You could never make that much. And plus, I couldn't crowdfund it without knowing that Mark Gottwald would allow me to do it. And I mean, I haven't even seen the negative. I don't know what, I know it's still stored. And there at one point it was going to come out from another company, but my involvement with Axanar, CBS killed the company that was going to release it was a CBS licensee, and they killed it when I was involved in the Axanar lawsuit. So that was a bummer. But yeah, hopefully one day, I hope to get it out soon. We'll see. I've been talking to people over the years. Maybe something will happen. Zachary King said, ever tried Sennheiser? Love my HD 308p Pro headphones. HD 380 Pro headphones. Yeah, I've got Sennheiser mics. I use all those but these are Sony studio micro cans. I really like these. Sennheiser, I'm sure, makes great headphones as well. I've never used them, but I'm sure they are great. I would definitely use them. I really like Sennheiser stuff. Their microphones are amazing. And yeah, so why not? This is not a letter. This letter comes from Dieter Bastian, our old friend Dieter Bastian. Hello, Dieter. Greetings, Rob. Dieter here. Begun the streaming wars have, and on the front line of battle for his international imagination connoisseurs who have to wait a little longer, the Viceroy of Verisimilitude. Given us all the ins and outs of this shiny new service called Disney Plus, Rob wastes no time and is shooting content from the hip, as it were, the wild, wild west. A little bit of Tron here, a little bit of Jeff Goldblum there, plunging into the overture of the black hole, checking if Disney is fiddled with Dumbo, then back to the Mandalorian, which luckily didn't cost him much time because the runtime is short and there is so much more to see here. And then it happens. Like a struck of lightning, our master of fun and wonder finds himself once again in self-doubt about collecting physical media and their declining state of sales. Rob, just stop. And no, I don't mean stop buying movies on 4K or Blu-ray, even if you have those collected movies now, even richer at your fingertips with more bonus content on Disney Plus. Why, you ask? Because you've been doing it for so long and it's our hobby and we park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay, mister. Plain and simple. You don't have to justify your passion for it to anyone except Elizabeth, of course. Yeah, Elizabeth doesn't understand why I have multiple copies of movies, but she likes the fact that I have movies. Yes, you're right. It doesn't make much sense anymore. Spock would say illogical. Yes, it is, but other people have different hobbies which seem just as strange or unrational to me as our collecting of movies in physical form to them. A worker colleague owns a Toyota Supra because of his love for the Fast and the Furious franchise. Does he have a new Toyota Supra? Because that is my car of desire right now. I used to own a Supra, an older Supra, but I want a new Supra so bad, even though BMW's made most of it. I want one. One of those Homages auctions is going on. They're giving away a Supra with Paul Walker's brother. They're giving away a Supra and you get $50,000 to soup it up. And I actually wanted to drop some money into that, but I'm like, I'd never win. Of course, I'll never win if I don't enter, but someone else is going to win anyway. So if I were to enter a contest to win a Supra, I'd just get my hopes up. So I'm not going to do it. But anyway, of course, it has even more horsepower than the factory settings deliver. Does it make any? Well, that's true. If you get a new Supra, you can totally tweak the engine and make it much faster than what you get with the original factory delivery. Does it make any sense to me to own such a car for usage in normal city traffic environment, even with our famous no speed limit Autobahn? Absolutely not, but it's his passion, and that's great. Hey, man, I just want to sit in that car. I love my Supra. I loved it. Another friend of mine owns an older Corvette and an old Opel GT. Guess what, Rob? They're just sitting in the garage unless there's a meeting of old car enthusiasts, and those only take place in the summertime. He also collects train models. The little ones that you put on a large table if you have a separate room for it. I ask myself, how long can you have fun watching those trains driving in circles, no matter how elaborate the track is? When he told me what he had spent on a special locomotive, my eyes rolled almost out of sight into the back of my head. But who am I to judge spending unholy sums for Hot Toys figures? Let me tell you something. First of all, go look up Rod Stewart. Yes, that Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart's model train set. Go look it up. And I have a girl, the first girl I ever kissed when I was in the 5th grade, Tari Cook. Her husband worked for Microsoft and built, they had a house on the top floor of their garage. They had a 3-car garage. He built a gigantic train set. He went to Germany twice a year just to buy trains and equipment for his model train set. And I think, you know what, it's not just, great model train sets are not just about the trains going around in circles. It's about the whole world. You're creating a whole miniature environment. And if that floats your boat, and I know you like Hot Toys figures, so it does, it's the building of the miniature environment that's so amazing. All the little details on every different level. So check out Rod Stewart's. Just look up Rod Stewart's train set. Check it out because he just finished it. Let's look at your show host, the bad Canadian kid. He collects those totally stupid Funko Pop toys. At least to me, they have no value, but it doesn't matter whatever it is. Do or do not, there is no try. And don't do it half-baked. That's the other side of the spectrum. People who have 10 different passions, but not one of those they're doing right. Who cares if you have 50 different versions of Dawn of the Dead? To me, it's awesome because I'm collecting the same thing. Okay, you have me beaten there quite a bit, Rob. I guess I have only 3 or perhaps 4 editions max. I don't even know. But it's Dawn of the Dead, man. You got to have it. You know what? They're all going to be replaced by the second sight version of Dawn of the Dead. That's going to be done sometime next year. I cannot wait. Richard Rubenstein came to his senses and gave Second Sight access to the actual negative materials. So we're going to get the best Dawn of the Dead ever. I can't wait. I was thrilled when one of your imagination connoisseurs told us he had bought Daredevil on Blu-ray, even if he'd watched it on Netflix, but he liked the show. That's awesome in my book, too. I bought The Haunting of Hill House on US Blue Disc because I'm a fan of Mike Flanagan, who directed all 10 episodes himself, which is uncommon considering it being a TV show. It's also unedited. It's a longer director's cut. When I saw that Blue Disc release is coming with extended episodes, I didn't even bother to start a Netflix watch, and I just waited. And then, Rob, something unusual happened. I even listened to 2 of his audio commentary tracks, which I haven't done in a long time, because they were simply too good to stop. I don't know if you've seen the series with the awesome episode 6. I have, which is combined of just 4 long takes with only 3 edits for the first 50 minutes. And to listen to him, how the cast and crew pulled off the impossible task was terrific. And Rob, now I will make you roll your eyes in the back of your head. Here in front of me is another Netflix buy on Blu-ray. Yes, I'm talking about Star Trek Discovery Season 2, which I have yet to see. Since I'm a binger, I wanted to wait until all the episodes were completely available. And then it happened. Robservation took shape and became a steady listen, and the anticipation of watching Star Trek Discovery Season 2 went down the drain. Thanks, Rob. But now as I have it on Blue Disc, I'm looking forward to it anyway. Rob, at least tell me it's flashy. Oh, it is. You know I can easily be manipulated if it's shiny. When I go to my cinema, they're playing a promotional clip for going to the movies in general. It says going to the movies means deliberately deciding what you want to watch. The same goes for me. If I decide specifically on a Blu-ray to watch, this still holds more merit to me than scrolling up and down along a watch list, and after that, just take a shot in the dark with something completely different. So, Rob, stop your wild, wild west streaming habits, load up on your Blu-rays once in a while, and choose more with a clear mindset on a specific movie. And never be in doubt again if collecting physical media makes sense anymore, and it always does. See you in the undiscovered country, Deutschland. Dieter. Well, Dieter, I love when you say Deutschland. Look, I still collect physical media. You know, I'm really upset, though. I got to tell you, want to see my latest? So, you know, by the way, Barnes & Noble always has 50% off Criterion, at least twice a year. So I ordered a few things that hadn't come out yet, like All About Eve and Betty Blue, which I got. But then they sent me Cold War, which I was really waiting to get. And they sent me the DVD, bruh. Now, I keep the receipt, but really, I've never ordered a DVD from your sale ever. And you sent me a DVD after everything else you sent me? Why'd you do that? Why did you do that? Anyway, Dieter, I don't think I'm going to stop buying physical media anytime soon. I was only speaking about the things on Disney Plus, Pixar, Disney movies themselves, and of course the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm just saying, I have all the MCU movies on on 4K now anyway. I'm just saying, you know, I still bought them. Still going to buy physical media for the time being, but I mean, Disney Plus, why buy another Disney movie ever again? I mean, I guess I'll buy the Marvel movies just because they have to be on the shelf. But even that I can't justify, because how many times are you going to watch these things? I don't know. And if they're on Disney Plus, although I don't like these reports of the fake HDR, the fake high dynamic range. Not cool, Disney. Not cool if that's true. We shall see, but not a good thing. But yes, I'm going to continue buying physical media. Because by the way, it's getting cheaper too. The discs are getting cheaper, especially if you buy the UK discs. Braden Nation says, yes, Free Enterprise is free to watch on Amazon. It is. That is not my preferred extended cut of the movie, and it's only in 4:3. The Anchor Bay 2006 DVD is 13 minutes longer than that version. And I think it's a better version. No, it's not 13 minutes. It's like 8 minutes. But it's a better version of the movie. That version of the movie that's on Amazon doesn't even have the special effects in the Logan's Run dream sequence, the Dome City or anything like that. They just threw it up there. It's terrible. It's standard definition. It kills me every time I hate that people are going to see that version of the film, because it's not my new transfer. It's not the new sound mix. It doesn't have the new scenes. It doesn't have the visual effects. It's really lame. Anthony Gonzalez says, I just want to say I hope Blake Jenner never gets to work in show business again. What a coward. Loved Melissa Benoist. What an incredible thing she did. Oh, is Blake Jenner the guy that she was talking about? Man, Melissa Benoist, what she did, that was truly super heroic. For those of you who don't know, Melissa Benoist Supergirl did a post on Instagram about how she was the victim of significant other domestic abuse. And that guy, what a douchebag that guy is. I mean, how do you go out with Supergirl and treat her that way? And she's so adorable. Here is a new letter from it's a new letter, but it's from a new viewer, a new writer, Martin Jackson. Martin Jackson says, hi, Rob, it's Martin J. I'm a daily watcher and fan of the Robservations. I've messaged you in the past about my Marvel figurines that I collected. Yes, this time it's for a business message. I was just wondering about your comic collection and what's for sale. Okay, you've got some money to spend and you're interested in Marvel complete runs. I understand that one comic out of the run might be worth more than the others in the same collection, but it's the odd comic that gives the rest of the run its value. I'm a personal collector and want them for myself and would be interested in what you have for sale. When you get the time, message me back with a list of what you have for sale and the prices you want. Well, listen, I did write Martin, and I never heard back from Martin. Maybe he sent it back to me or not. Yes, I've got about 65 long boxes of comics. Most of them are in mint to near mint condition. Most of them are from the 80s. And I have basically replaced most of my comic collection with omnibuses and hardcovers. So I just want to get rid of the individual comics. And I have everything. You name it, I probably have it. If it's from the 80s, I have most of the significant runs of comics. Some of the runs I've already gotten rid of. Like I did get rid of my beloved Sandmans because I have the absolute editions. But yeah, if you're interested, I'm basically going to blow out all my comics cheap, and I wanted to get rid of them. So if there's anything you want, full runs of things, I will get rid of them cheap. So absolutely, Martin, I am right there with you. So if anybody wants them, if anybody's interested in anything, I'd just like to see them have a good home. Amir B is here. Amir B says, hi, Rob. I rewatched Apocalypse Now this weekend. Still jaw-dropping after all these years, but I don't want to talk about the movie or the story itself. Watching the movie again made me think why this movie, which ages almost 40 years, looks better and has more verisimilitude than 99% of all movies that have come out in the last 20 years. Has replacement of practical effects by CGI affected the legacy of modern cinema? Nowadays, most movies rely on CGI for most of their action set pieces. I understand its appeal. While not exactly cheaper, CGI is particularly convenient. Some movies develop an entire piece using CGI and others use a combination of both. But no matter what, they never reach the verisimilitude of classic movies. Additionally, I've been annoyed by another result of the use of CGI. I call it the shining effect. Modern CGI just looks too clean, too neat. It doesn't look real. These are true even for movies that use CGI very well. Disney remakes come to mind. For instance, look at Aladdin. Watching it, I never felt the dirty atmosphere the cartoon had. The city looked like a miniature of studio set with CGI landscape. Another example is Dark Fate. Knowing Tim Miller, I guess he did a lot of practical effects, but my God, mixing those with CGI made action fake and too clean. Batman v Superman is another movie that comes to mind. Even though they have an actual Batmobile, every scene the car in looks like it's CGI. The thing I've noticed is that time passes, the movies that rely on CGI too much look worse and honestly lose the rewatchability value, at least for me. I can't get past that awful CGI heavy third act in Black Panther. The first time I enjoyed it because I was excited about the movie. However, the second time, the CGI was just jarring, especially the last fight, which took out any sense of verisimilitude out of it. Watching Apocalypse Now last night, I'm still amazed at the wide helicopter shots. Upon rewatchability, the classic movies pre-CGI look even better and age like fine wine. Action scenes in Aliens, T2, Saving Private Ryan, they have more verisimilitude and look better. Plus, they don't have the shiny and glossy feel of CGI-heavy movies. However, nowadays, the majority of action movies are CGI-heavy. I know Christopher Nolan is one of the few directors that intentionally avoid CGI as much as possible, and to me, this has caused his movies to age so well with time. Dunkirk was breathtaking in its scope, and I still think Inception had the best action in his filmography and one of the best in the last 20 years. Just compare the Joseph Gordon-Levitt fight with the assassin in the hallway, which was actually built, versus the end fight of Black Panther. One looks great every time, and the other looks jarring just after one viewing. This makes me wonder, will big CGI-heavy action movies have the legacy as big as the old classics? Personally, I don't, but I'd love to hear your take. Thanks, and keep up the great work, Amir B. Well, Amir, you're right. I mean, here's the thing. Movies, I've said this before. Movies are... Oh, you want a cookie? Is that what you're trying to bribe me? Movies are all a trick. Nothing in a movie is real. It's all fake. You know, it's not like somebody just took a camera out into the real world and shot what was there and put it in a movie, unless you're Haskell Wexler and you're making Medium Cool. But for the most part, nothing is real. It's all phony. And I think you're right. I mean, even model photography. I've talked about on this show a lot. One of the things that I'm most obsessed by when it comes to making movies, and I'll say it again, is verisimilitude. Now, where verisimilitude really begins is what the camera lens sees. And not only that, it's the way the camera lens is seeing something. Like, for instance, if you shoot something with a 50 millimeter lens straight on, you shoot two people talking, it could look realistic, but it doesn't look cinematic. And what's really interesting is if you keep the camera like this and you shoot with a 50 millimeter lens, it doesn't look very real, even though you might be looking at something that's actually practical and two people just talking, it's not cinematic. But if you change the lens, make it a 40 millimeter lens or a bigger lens and move the camera like this, so you're pointing up, suddenly something becomes a little bit more cinematic. Now, what we really want is we want both. We want something that's cinematic and something that has verisimilitude. It's a really hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to create, and I'm obsessed by it. Now, how is verisimilitude created? Knowing that all movies are a trick, what you really want to do is you basically think about when you're making movies, you want to make the audience that's sitting in the theater feel like whatever it is they're in, whether it's an action scene or not, feel like they're basically an observer watching, whether they're omnipotent and they're invisible and nobody in the movie can see them. You want to make the audience feel as if what they're watching is actually happening before their eyes. Now, in order to do that, which is a trick, obviously, in order to do that, a million different things have to come into play to make you believe. That means that, first of all, let's say you're building a set, a restaurant set, and you're not filming at a practical restaurant. When I say practical, that's a real location. Like, we went out to a real restaurant. Like, there's a diner in on the way to Venice in West LA called Ray's that a lot of people, it's been in a bunch of different movies. A lot of people shoot there because when you shoot in a real location, I love practical locations because all the stuff that are in practical locations are actually there. You don't have to have an art department recreate it. And there's things in practical locations such as peeling paint or stickers somebody might put on the wall, or little tchotchkes, or just weird little quirks of whatever establishment you're shooting in that make it feel real, you know? So when you're doing that, you automatically have, when I made Free Enterprise, speaking of Free Enterprise, we were on practical locations the whole time, and our budget was very small, but I think those practical locations really benefited us. We got a look to the film that we wouldn't have had normally if we were trying to recreate places. The Garden of Eden club that was on the corner of La Brea and Hollywood, the big 2-story club, we could never have built that set or found that set and dressed it, found an empty room and dressed it to make it look like that club. So that's why I wanted to shoot there, and you immediately get an authenticity. But the problem with a lot of CG is the trick that's being played on us. We know that we're seeing camera, right? I mean, we know that a camera is seeing what's being shot. We also know that we know what a physical camera, even if it's a small camera, we know that a physical camera is set up in a certain space and can only get a certain amount of latitude when you're shooting. So when you have CG, for instance, and say you were going to shoot in Apocalypse Now, you're going to shoot the helicopter attack on the beach. It would all be CG. You'd be using practical cameras and a combination of live action plates, and then something that's inserted later. And the problem is, what happens is, once you have the ability to move your virtual camera around in 3D space, you can actually get shots that are physically impossible to get with a real camera. And what's something that people don't consider is, once you're now unfettered by the realities of a physical camera and you can do anything, people will do anything. They'll make camera moves that are impossible to do otherwise. And what happens is, the trick of movie making, we sort of become untethered from reality once the virtual camera starts making moves that a physical camera can't make. It's all a trick. It's in the back of your mind, but you know, if a virtual camera is whipping around aircraft too fast, that you're seeing something that isn't really there. Even with model photography, you have the same thing. With model photography, you actually have a model being shot by a camera. We know. You can tell in the back of your mind, subconsciously, you know. But what CG did was computer graphics imagery allowed you to create things that could never have been seen before and couldn't have been made with physical cameras. So that became very enticing. You could build cityscapes you'd never seen before, vistas, science fiction environments. And so it's pretty great what they did. It's just a question of, how do you employ it? And I agree with you. Watching Apocalypse Now, especially the helicopter attack on the beach, is so amazing because it is practical. You're at a beach that's on the water, and real helicopters from the Philippine Air Force or whatever. You're right, Tallulah? And it's incredible, and you know that it's really happening. And those days are over. That will never, ever happen again. There's insurance considerations. I mean, who's going to let you do that? Where are you going to do that? These things will not happen again. So it's fundamentally changed the reality in movies. And I agree with you. You know, going back and watching Aliens, you're watching dudes in alien suits dropping out of the ceiling and attacking, and it's all real. You know, even when you get into Alien 3, when you have the dog burster or the cow burster, depending on which version of Alien 3 you're watching, the creature is it's CG and it's a puppet. And you know, it just it no longer moves with any kind of reality. And you're like, and that's really the problem. And I think you're right. I think when we look back in 50 years, because eventually CGI and deep learning and deep fake and AI will be able to make things look more realistic, because your virtual cameras, it'll get better. even though we'll still know that it's fake. I mean, I long for the days. One of my favorite effects sequences in any movie, and it's such a subtle thing, but it's totally convincing, is in Die Hard. Die Hard, Richard Edlund, 65 millimeter. The effects were shot in 65 millimeter. The scene where John McClane is on the top of the Nakatomi Plaza and there's a helicopter and the side of the helicopter is firing at him. They're firing out of the helicopter. That helicopter just wasn't there. It was a model. And that is a very, very convincing shot because I think back in the day, not back in the day, but back in the late 80s, they really understood, especially Richard Edlund's work. He really understood how to create the illusion of reality using both miniature. That was a miniature effect too, miniature and live action. And it's just an art form. Now we rely on CG. You're right. It is too shiny because ultimately, no matter how good it looks, and by the way, there's a lot of good looking CGI you'd never know is CG these days, but it doesn't affect you. Like I recently watched The Dark Knight Rises. I forgot about the plane sequence at the beginning. That's jaw-dropping. It's jaw-dropping. It's an amazing sequence because so much of it's practical and you're watching and going, this is amazing. It's amazing. That was the last time as I was watching it again, I'm like, wow, I'd forgotten how effective that scene was because so much of it is practical. But yeah, it's a bummer, man. But on the other hand, we're getting things that we never would have seen before. I mean, it really is. We live in a world where you got to take the good with the bad. It's tough. It's tough, but yeah. Rick Berg says everyone should watch the D'Agostini Millennium Falcon customized build by Christopher Olsen on YouTube. Rick, you are correct. I have watched that video many times. What Rick is referring to, there is a company called D'Agostini that makes aircraft, and they also make some Star Wars models that you can either buy them monthly as a subscription or buy all the parts at once. And it's basically it's the same size as the studio scale Millennium Falcon, and it's about this big, and it's huge. And I think that the whole kit costs like $1,500 to buy, and then you customize it. You have to paint it yourself, but it's an amazing kit, and there's a whole aftermarket, secondary market parts that you can buy to even make it more accurate. Please do that. The D'Agostini Millennium Falcon is amazing. I would love to get it. It's the same size as the Master Replicas Millennium Falcon, but it is to scale with the original model of the Falcon. It's incredible. And the customized build by Christopher Olsen, I think if it's the video I'm thinking of, it took him years, and he says how long it took him at the end of the video. Watch it. It's a great thing. And if you like models, I've always wanted that. I have a Fine Molds 1/72nd scale model I built that's up there. You can see it right here. That's my Millennium Falcon. But I'd love to get the D'Agostini one because it's bigger. And I love my spaceships. I'm a size queen when it comes to my spaceship models. Sadu's Screening Room is here. Sadu's Screening Room says, the idea of Star Wars has always overshadowed the reality of the movies for me. Also, how can you tell if your stream is in 4K UHD? Well, first of all, you would need a 4K UHD TV that can get that stream. It'll tell you. You'll see an indicator that you're getting that. But yeah, you have to have a 4K TV that's capable. And I guess all 4K TVs are, but you would notice, and you'd be able to tell. I mean, a UHD stream it's pretty spectacular if you haven't seen it. It's amazing. It's amazing. And you know what movie looks really good in 4K UHD? Last Jedi. Boy, is that a good looking movie. Let me tell you. Jer Mananin is here. One day, Jer, I got to call. One day I'm just going to call you up and go, how do you say your name? Do you read Star Wars books? Which are your favorite? Oh my God, I've read so many Star Wars books over the years. It's so fun. The first Star Wars book I ever read was Splinter of the Mind's Eye when it first came out. The Alan Dean Foster book that George Lucas had commissioned to if he wanted to make a cheap sequel to Star Wars, and that's where the Kyber crystal came from. The idea of the Kyber crystal. Wow. That's hard to say. There's a lot. I don't know. There's so many Star Wars books that I have liked. I always go back to old school. I mean, the Han Solo trilogy, the Lando Calrissian trilogy, the Thrawn trilogy. I don't know if those are the best. I really like the was it Rogue Squadron? The Rogue Squadron books I thought were pretty good. The last books I've read, I like Tarkin. The Tarkin book was pretty good. I like the characterization of Tarkin. I thought that was interesting. And then I read Catalyst as well. I read both of those before Rogue One, and I like those. But man, I'd have to go back. I'd have to actually look at a list of all the different Star Wars books that I've read, because it's funny. It's not like Star Trek books where one pops out. But yeah, I'd have to look. I'll get back to you on that. Because I think that's a really good question. Let's see. Wow, I'm going to read. I think I'll read another letter. But man, there's just a lot to read. I have so many letters I haven't got to. Oh, well. I read Willow's SpongeBob letter, which is so good. I don't know if you guys heard Willow Yang's SpongeBob SquarePants letter, but man, did I love it. Now, this is this. I'm not going to read that letter. I get lots of spam too. Let's see. I'm still looking for a good one. I'm still looking for a good letter. There's so many to go through. I'm a little overwhelmed. But maybe I'll save one. Okay. Here's one from somebody that I let's see. Oh no, I can't read. Wow. I can't do that one either. You know what? I'll go back to our old standby, Stubble McShave. I like this letter because it's a literary letter. Stubble McShave's always good. He's a literary guy. Hi, Rob. When I told you that I plan to read Hyperion, first of all, I have to say, before I read this letter, Dan Simmons is one of my favorite writers. And Dan Simmons wrote one of my favorite horror novels, which is Carrion Comfort. Carrion, Carrion, Carrion Comfort. But he also wrote one of my favorite science fiction books, which is Hyperion. It's part of what he calls the Hyperion Cantos. Now, he wrote Hyperion as one book, but it was split into two. So there's Hyperion and there's Fall of Hyperion. And it's just an incredible, incredible book. So that's a little background I'm going to give you for this letter. Hi, Rob. When I told you that I planned to read Hyperion, you told me to get back to you what I thought of it. Well, I finished The Fall of Hyperion, Book 2, and here are some of my thoughts. If you read this on the show, I will insert the premise from Wikipedia here. It's very concise and doesn't give away any plot points. In the 29th century, the hegemony of man comprises thousands of planets connected by Farcaster portals. The hegemony maintains an uneasy alliance with the Technocore, a civilization of AIs. Modified humans, known as ousters, live in space stations between stars and are engaged in a conflict with the hegemony. Numerous outback planets have no Farcasters and cannot be accessed without incurring significant time dilation. One of these planets is Hyperion, home to structures known as the Time Tombs, which are moving backwards in time and guarded by a legendary creature known as the Shrike. On the eve of an ouster invasion of Hyperion, a final pilgrimage to the Time Tombs has been organized. The pilgrims decide that they will each tell the tale of how they were chosen for the pilgrimage. I had kind of a hard time to get into Hyperion in the beginning. I found the establishing descriptions of the tree ship interesting, but I had difficult time keeping track of which character was the poet and who was the scholar and so on. The 6 pilgrims share their stories on why they're on the pilgrimage, and I didn't enjoy the first one, which was the priest's tale. I almost thought of putting it down, but continued on with the soldier's tale, which was filled with sex and violence. This made me realize that the tales would be quite different from one another, and I continued on. I found the scholar's tale the most interesting, with his daughter being exposed to the Time Tombs and aging backwards. I found it really engaging how he persevered with taking care of her and how he never gave up. I thoroughly enjoyed the other Pilgrim stories and was quite excited into sinking my teeth into book 2. Book 2 had a completely different structure, and the second half of it didn't really connect with me. I thought there were some inconsistencies in how Rachel's illness was depicted from what was set up in book 1. In book 1, they established that Rachel lost a day of life and its memories each time she slept. In book 2, they changed that to a gradual decrease in age for more or less each minute. Maybe there's something I missed, but I was a bit confused. I found the changes in POV in book 1 interesting. It went from third limited in the group scenes into first POV in the individual tales. In the first tale, the priest tale, we have a first-person expository, epistolary, pardon me, I said sponsor, epistolary, through the diary entries, similar way to Bram Stoker's Dracula. In book 2, I found a bit of inconsistency in the POVs. It sometimes changed from third to first person, which maybe others don't react to, which, although I didn't pull me out of the story, I found a bit jarring. I have heard people wanting this book turned into movies or a TV series, and I think that could be done to some extent of the first book. Each Pilgrim's Tale could be a 60 to 80-minute long episode in a TV series. The second book, I think, is very difficult to turn into a TV series or a movie. It jumps around a lot, and there's so many literary concepts and philosophies in the heart of this story, so that I don't think it could be adapted within a reasonable budget, because they can't spend a whole lot on this unless they would change the story from the personal story that's presented and instead make it into a sci-fi spectacle, which focuses more on the galactic conflict rather than the personal stories. I can't see how they would get a big enough audience to tune into if they focused on the philosophical and religious questions that's at the heart of these books. I thought The Shrike was fascinating and a prime example of Lovecraftian horror in its concept. It was something that was so alien and so powerful in mysterious ways that there was a morbid fascination of it. I didn't quite get what happened with it in the end, though. I found the books thoroughly enjoying, and I'm glad that I read them, but they will not crack my top 10. I'll give the first book a 4 out of 5 and the second book a 3.5 out of 5, which totals up to 3.8 out of 5. I think I would enjoy The Priest's Tale more in a reread of the books. I often find that it's enjoyable to discover the setup pieces and the foreshadowing whenever I do a reread. So those are my initial thoughts on Hyperion. I know it's one of your favorite books. I can't quite join you in that, but as you said, I'm glad that I read them and found them thoroughly enjoyable. I will end this with a Terry Pratchett quote from Hogfather, since we're getting close to Christmas time. Quote, "Getting an education was a bit like a communicable sexual disease. It made you unsuitable for a lot of jobs, and then you had the urge to pass on it, or pass it on." Thanks, Stubble. Well, Stubble, thank you, first of all, for reading Hyperion. Look, I stand by it. I love the Hyperion Cantos. By the way, there's 2 more books. There's Endymion and Rise of Endymion that he wrote later, but I still love Hyperion. And look, if you liked Hyperion at all, read Peter Watts, his book Blind Sight from 2006. It was nominated for a Hugo Award, and I love it. I'm obsessed with this book. I don't know why, but I'm obsessed with it. Glenn A asks, he says, just wanted to ask if you'd be interested in getting external help with graphic design. We do graphic design work like banners, advertisements, photo edits, logos, flyers, etc. for a fixed monthly fee. We don't charge for each task. What kind of work do you need on a regular basis? Let me know, and I'll share my portfolio with you. Well, Glenn A, I appreciate that. Sure, absolutely send your portfolio to share with me. I mean, you know that the more money that we make for the channel, I'm going to step it up. When you start seeing how the Robservations shows work after episode 300, there's a lot more graphic design elements. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. Like, even when you see me here, you'll see a lower third that says the Burnettwork. And, you know, I've just been talking with the bare minimum of production value. And I want to really up the show after a year. I mean, I think even I'm sick and tired of just me talking. I want it to be flashier and interesting. And I want to be able to do, you know, like hot toy cam and just cut to the hot toy shelf, stuff like that. So you can, and I'll move the camera every show that it'll have different characters. I mean, there's just things I want to do from a filmmaking perspective. I even made an opening with my theme song, and I want to use all that. So yeah, it's just a question of being able to pay for it. You know, that's what I put a lot of the money back into, doing other things for the channel. So I definitely would be interested. So please send me your portfolio. This one comes from James Sparrow. Rob, Laser Bob, I had to write in and ask a question about a comment you made on Robservations live chat 253, I think. You were talking about the radio drama of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and you were going off on a tangent about working at a framing shop at the time of the radio drama came out. I was waiting for some comment on the relevance between the two, and it never came. I think I already read this once, but I'm going to answer it again. Sorry. Okay, let me start that again. I wrote in to write you a question about a comment you made on Robservations live chat 253, I think. You were talking about the radio drama of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and you were going off on a tangent about working at a framing shop at the time the radio drama came out. I was waiting for some comment on the relevance between the two, and it never came. Sorry, just really curious on the correlation between the two. I was also wondering what you thought of the Star Wars radio drama that came out at close to the same time. I think it's the closest thing to a true Star Wars expanded edition we ever got. I didn't even mind the dude from Riptide being Han. Well, okay, James, I think I read this once before, but so at the time when I first heard The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I was working at a frame store. That was it. I would listen to it at work while I was cutting glass and cutting mat boards. I was young too, 13, 14. I was working at a really nice frame shop, and I was sort of apprenticing, and I was framing pictures. So picture framing is expensive. I was cutting, molding, and the actual frames and cutting glass. And, I would listen to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to pass the time, and I loved it. That's the only thing. And I was listening to Star Wars at the same time too. I love the Star Wars radio special that was done by NPR. It was lovely. It was wonderful. And was it Perry King? Was Perry King playing Han Solo? Perry King from class of 1984, Perry King. So yeah, it was no big deal. That was just why that was one of the things that why I did that. Why I mentioned that. Which I thought, I loved Hitchhiker's Guide. And that Star Wars radio show. I thought it was great. Timbula the Spider Monkey here. Again, hey, Tim from Down Under. Bizarre complaint time. I hate the box for the Guardians of the Galaxy 2 Stanley Hot Toy. The figure itself is amazing, but the packaging is annoying and hard to stack. For those of you who don't know, Hot Toys usually come in rectangular boxes, like shoe boxes. You lift the top off, but the Hot Toy for Stan Lee in his astronaut suit comes in like a blister pack, like that a much smaller action figure would come in. And yes, it's kind of cool what they did, but it is a little unruly, and it's hard to pack, and it's hard to store with other Hot Toys figures. So Tim, I feel your pain. I feel the exact same thing. I have yet to get mine. I'm still slowly paying it off. I love that I pay off action figures the way other people pay off cars. But God bless Sideshow for doing that. But yeah, I can't wait to get that. Here's a letter from Jason Webster. Hi, Robert. Hope you and the members of the Post-Geek Singularity continue to be well and happy. I would like to take this opportunity to weigh in on the subject of George Lucas and Disney. On paper, the sale of Lucasfilm to Disney looked and sounded like a solid business decision from numerous angles. The sale would increase Lucas's personal wealth and would guarantee the Star Wars and Indiana Jones franchises a solid home. Disney is an extremely successful organization, both creatively and financially, from its numerous portfolios, most notably film, where it has won or received over 85 Academy Awards and billions in box office revenue from its well-known animated films and live-action franchises such as Pirates of the Caribbean, either produced or distributed through its current and former production and distribution assets, Walt Disney Pictures, Marvel Films, Buena Vista International, and Touchstone Pictures. Then there's Lucasfilm's collaboration with the studio over the Star Tours motion simulator attraction at Disney's theme parks in Anaheim, Orlando, Tokyo, and Paris. However, there's much more personal connection between the two men who built their respective companies, George Lucas and Walt Disney. Like Walt, Lucas has established himself as a man with a tremendous ability as a creator of characters and a terrific establisher of worlds within films that delight and entertain billions around the world. Secondly, like Walt, Lucas is a shrewd businessman who understands the rules of becoming successful and wealthy within a tough and competitive industry. Finally, like Walt, Lucas is a visionary determined to push the envelope for what is possible in film production and exhibition. Like Walt, he persuaded theaters to install the latest sound technology to enable audiences to hear films the way he intended them to be heard. Disney insisted selected theaters in cities such as New York, Los Angeles, Boston, and Washington to install Fantasound, a stereophonic sound system for Fantasia in 1940, while Lucas established THX Sound for the Star Wars franchise. Disney encouraged and financed innovations such as the multi-plane camera invented by Disney animator Ub Iwerks to improve the filming quality of feature animation, while Lucas established ILM to improve the quality of visual effects in the original Star Wars, and was the first to exclusively shoot a full feature-length blockbuster film digitally with the Sony HDW F900 camera for Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. The film marked the dawn of the acceptance of exclusively shooting digitally. However, executives within Disney and Lucasfilm do not share Lucas's artistic, creative, and visionary capabilities. Unfortunately, their decisions have led to the splitting of the fandom, legitimate criticisms of the course they had taken with the franchise without an overarching plan, and low sales from merchandise, especially toys. Not to mention their all too frequent hiring and firing of directors from film projects. They are businessmen who rely on projections and other quantifiable tools when making decisions without incorporating creative thinking and instincts on what films can be successful. They are also too heavily into risk aversion. Sometimes a risk is worth taking, as that saying goes. With great risk comes great reward. Sometimes you have just to take a leap of faith and back yourself. Well, in Disney and Lucasfilm case, they must start hiring and backing the right directors to the hilt. I agree with those that say scaling back budgets could help in limiting the risk. Star Wars was a risk for George Lucas, and his determined backing of himself and his crew paid high dividends. Steven Spielberg took risks in directing Jaws and Jurassic Park, but they proved very successful. Another example of backing your director is Fright Night. Fright Night, for real. If you haven't seen the original Fright Night with Roddy McDowall and William Ragsdale, you have to see it, and Chris Sarandon. So good. Columbia left Tom Holland to create the contemporary horror comedy, and there was no interference from the studio. The film became a hit. Sure, part of the reason is the studio felt Perfect, starring John Travolta and Jamie Lee Curtis, that went into production around the same time, would be the studio's big hit that year, and they would eventually be proved very wrong in that assumption. Still, they left Holland to create the film he wanted with cast and crew. Too many times, Lucasfilm has hired and fired directors midstream. For Solo, a Star Wars story, the consequence was overinflating the budget and adding further damage to the franchise and seriously hindering the potential for the film to recoup its money, let alone turn a profit from its theatrical run. Unfortunately for Disney Lucasfilm, there was no overarching plan for the new trilogy within the Star Wars franchise. As a consequence, the new trilogy has no real fleshed-out characters, and the story is so disjointed. The new trilogy has been so jarring in this respect. However, there is light at the end of the tunnel for Disney Lucasfilm. I like the idea of Jon Favreau heading Lucasfilm in cooperation with Dave Filoni and Kevin Feige with the Star Wars franchise for all future trilogies, films, and television shows. Feige and Favreau work together within the MCU on a number of films, and they would ensure they bring the fans together again. Favreau and Filoni are involved with the Mandalorian television series, which is proving to be a step in the right direction for the studio. There is so much of the expected universe they would mine and produce quality content for films and television. With that, they would also produce original stories as well. Also, Deborah Chow directing a Star Wars feature film would be great. I like the idea of Obi-Wan being a streaming series. This is where such content would be great for the interim, and they could build to a feature film if they want. The same with any of the number of character-driven films or one-off stories, just to get great characters and screenwriters to very closely follow Favreau and Filoni's vision. Your main character can explore new worlds and characters, as well as visiting old worlds already established in the original trilogy and prequels. I look forward to being entertained by future episodes of Robservations. Sincerely, Jason Webster. Well, Jason, I thought that was a great letter. I mean, it's a sentiment a lot of people have expressed recently. I'm not so sold on Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni taking over the Star Wars franchise based on what they've done with The Mandalorian. I think making a classical Western set in the Star Wars universe, good idea. Certainly not a head scratcher. But I don't know if that means they're capable of exploring. I mean, Filoni's already shown that he's done a great job with the Clone Wars, no doubt. But what I think we need somebody, a very smart person, the same way that Nicholas Meyer, who's a novelist, very erudite, came and took over the Star Trek franchise and made Wrath of Khan. I think that maybe Favreau, judging by the Mandalorian's fun, but I want to see some real world building. I think we need a really true creative visionary that we've never had in the Star Wars franchise, that we need to have come in and really create something new that rather than look to old Westerns or something, really does something new, a new paradigm. But we'll see. I mean, Filoni's obviously loves Star Wars and is good, but I don't know if he's necessarily the guys for the job. I don't know yet. And we'll see. I mean, everyone's already speculating that Kathleen Kennedy's out. Look, her contract's up in 2021. Who knows if she'll stick around? But let's see what happens. I mean, if Rise of Skywalker turns out to surprise everybody and be fantastic, I mean, I'm skeptical more so than anyone. We'll see. But I hope they are. I hope they do. But we'll see. I mean, with Mandalorian doing great, with ratings and people watching it and bringing them to Disney Plus, and with the upcoming Rise of Skywalker, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Kyle McCaskill says, I asked the Phantom Menace, why don't they write an original screenplay that's better than Star Wars? And they laughed at the idea. You mean the Fandom Menace, I would imagine. No, look, man, writing a screenplay is really hard. You know, it's one thing to be a fan. It's a whole nother thing to make the transition to the non-fan and into the professional realm. It's tough, man. It's hard. But, you know, I think when people, as Clint Eastwood said, a man's got to know his limitations. So if they aren't going to write a screenplay, you know, I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to write a Star Wars screenplay with all the people primed to hate it. I could probably collaborate with somebody and write a great Star Wars screenplay, but I don't know if I have that in me. Man, I wouldn't want to. What an unenviable task to write a Star Wars movie. But ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to the end of this Robservations episode number 286. I want to thank you for joining me on Black Friday. I very much appreciate it. I want to thank my moderators. First of all, the Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden of Riverdale, Iowa. I want to thank Jordy Lyons, who's new, and Louis Yu, the new members of the group. I want to thank, of course, Detective Jim and Greg Smith, who can build a house with his hands. Thanks for moderating, gents, and being the men that you are. I also want to thank all of you for contributing. I want to thank all of you for supporting the channel and everybody who sends things to the Burnettwork.net website. And remember, if you put anything at the Burnettwork.net, if you comment on any story, you are entered into a drawing for a free bottle of Lucky Tiger head to tail body scrub. So that's kind of cool. And this is going to be great. It's going to be a new year soon. I can't believe it. We're going into December 2020. It feels like the future now that Blade Runner time is in our rear view mirror. It's amazing. But anyway, I want to thank you all again. And I will be back tomorrow. And we're getting close to episode 300, where this show is going to change drastically. And I'm very excited for that. I hope you're going to go along on the ride with me. If you like these chats, please hit like, smash the like button. Or as Davey 504 would say, slap the like button. Anyway, because that helps. And thank you all for being here. And I've got to get off. I'm exhausted. I can't believe I feel like I need to go eat leftovers now. We have so many leftovers. I just want to dig in, put out a big plate and microwave that goodness. But anyway, I want to thank you all for being here. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I bring Robservations, the show about something, to a close. Robservations number 286. We are 14 days away from episode 300. Amazing. Thanks very much. And as always, have a better day.